Chapter 2836. After flying for a full hour, Fairy Hongxia came to a stop in front of a huge crater that was at least 100 li away. This is the ancestral hall of your Kai family? Where is it? Xiaohua was very surprised. When he saw the location of this depression with his divine sense, Xiaohua felt that there was something strange. Not only did he release his divine sense, but he also released his Buddhist sense and scanned the entire depression. Not only did he not find any fluctuations of magic power, but he also did not find anything strange. Of course it's here. Fairy Hongxia smiled sweetly. This used to be a huge lake, but now the lake water is gone. Then, can you still find the ancestral hall of the Kai family? Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao caught up and asked worriedly. Hee, we're already at the doorstep. Of course I have my ways. Fairy Hongxia said proudly to Xiaohua. Xiaohua, is there anything out of the ordinary around here? No. Xiaohua shook his head. There's really no one around. That's good. Fairy Hongxia said with a smile. Xiaolang, please retreat a little. Watch me open the doors of the ancestral hall. All right. Xiaohua and the rest retreated a few feet. Unexpectedly, Fairy Hongxia shook her head and said, You still have to retreat. Xiaohua was a little flabbergasted. He retreated more than 100 feet before stopping. Just as Xiaohua and the rest stopped, they heard a crisp sound in front of them. A crystal-clear phoenix celestial body with a faint sapphire blue radiance was released from Fairy Hongxia's body. The moment the celestial body appeared in mid-air, it immediately spread its wings. Rings of light shone from its wings, like the colorful feathers of a phoenix. What was special was that when the sun shone on the celestial body, a rainbow of colors shot out from the celestial body, making it look extremely beautiful. Xiaohua had naturally seen Fairy Hongxia reconstruct her phoenix celestial body in the cave. He only felt that it was weird, but did not pay much attention to it. Now that he saw it again under the light of day, he could not help but gasp. Putting aside the power of this phoenix celestial body, just the beauty of this beautiful mobile was definitely worthy of Fairy Hongxia's beauty. The phoenix dharma body slightly spread its wings, and a round of light flashed by like a flying shadow. An indescribable illusion immediately appeared in Xiaohua's eyes, as if the phoenix dharma body had rushed into his eyes. Not only is Senior Martial Sister's Ice Phoenix celestial body much more beautiful, but it's also a little smaller. Xiao Mao was also intoxicated, and only after a while did he speak in a low voice. Not bad. Xiaohua also noticed that when the Ice Phoenix was reforged, it was still the same as before, but now the Ice Phoenix had actually shrunk, and it was only 30 meters in size. He didn't know why. Just as Xiaohua and the rest were watching, Fairy Hongxia's figure followed the Ice Phoenix celestial body and rushed into the deep depression. About 20 meters away from where she was previously standing, Fairy Hongxia rushed straight up into the sky again. Pooh! Fairy Hongxia paused for a moment, opened her mouth, and spat out a mouthful of essence blood. Her hands had already formed a seal, and she struck it. There were only a few seals, and they looked very simple. Under the seal, the essence blood spun a few times, and actually turned into an inch-long short arrow. Go, Fairy Hongxia lightly reprimanded. She pointed with both hands, and the blood-red short arrow rushed down from the sky, straight towards Fairy Hongxia's body, and shot towards the edge of the depression. With a soft paw sound, the short arrow landed on a flat, slanted wall. The moment the short arrow touched the slanted wall, it immediately sank in, and even left a soybean-sized hole in the slanted wall. Wang! Just a moment later, an extremely strange sound came from the slanted wall. It was like the cry of a phoenix, but also like the roar of a dragon. Moreover, this sound seemed to be compressed, and was extremely sharp. Along with this sound, an earth-shattering impact came from the soybean-sized hole, directly and horizontally pressing in all directions. Although Xiaohua and the rest were dozens of meters away, they could still feel the surging force. Since Xiaohua and the rest could feel it, Fairy Hongxia, who was close at hand, would naturally bear the brunt of it. In fact, a spiral-like shockwave engulfed Fairy Hongxia's entire body, along with the impact. The Ice Phoenix celestial body let out a long cry, flapping its wings, and welcomed this inexplicable wave. The wave's penetrative power was extremely strong, and in an instant, It passed through Fairy Hongxia's physical body and celestial body. Fairy Hongxia's protective magic treasure did not have any effect at all. The wave was like a huge wave, and after passing through Fairy Hongxia, it immediately converged, and the entire thing disappeared into the small hole. Moreover, after the impact, there was no echo, and the entire hole was the same as before, without any changes. Looking at Fairy Hongxia again, she could not hide the joy on her face. She kept her Ice Phoenix celestial body, retreated, and stood in midair outside the hole. Turning her head, she said to Xiao Hua and the rest, Xiao Lang, senior brother, Xiao Mao, follow me into the ancestral hall. Hearing Fairy Hongxia's call, Xiao Hua and the rest hurriedly flew over. However, before they could get close to Fairy Hongxia, they heard a series of violent crackling sounds, like thunder, below Fairy Hongxia's body, which was the place where the blood arrow had flown in. And then another wave of multicolored light shot up into the sky. Fairy Hongxia was clearly caught off guard, and her entire body was swept aside by the multicolored light, flying more than 10 meters away. Woo 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 woo, as if a bugle horn had been blown. An object that looked like a scroll was revealed from the light. The light flowed rapidly on the scroll, and as the sound of the bugle horn rang, it slowly unfurled itself. The scroll was laid flat in the deep hole, and as the scroll unfolded, a beautiful scene appeared in the light. There were mountains, rivers, birds, fish, and even a few empty boats floating on the surface of the water. Rumble, when the scroll was unfurled by dozens of feet, the mountain peak that was originally flat on the scroll seemed to be pulled by a large hand. It created a loud noise and slowly rushed out from the scroll. The mountain range around the mountain peak was also continuously formed and gradually meandered. The ripples on the surface of the water also surged out, and within the ripples, multicolored fish jumped out from the water from time to time. Chirp, 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 a few crisp chirps of birds rang out, and on the big tree that had just straightened up, emerald green birds flew between the soft branches again. Even Fairy Hongxia couldn't help but open her mouth and stared blankly at the scene before her. She watched as the scroll gradually filled up the hundreds of miles deep hole, and the previously dry hole had turned into a beautiful land of fish and rice in just a few moments. Quick, Xiao Hua, who was next to him, was stunned for a moment. When he saw the first open scroll begin to turn again, as if it was going to roll everything in, he hurriedly shouted, "Are we going to find the entrance to the ancestral temple in here?" Yes, I understand. Fairy Hongxia also came to her senses, and quickly pointed at the newly formed island on the surface of the water, and said, "The entrance is on the island. Previously, I thought it was in this deep hole." As she spoke, Fairy Hongxia took the lead and flew out, rushing towards the island. The millions of Meng mountains that were still in a drought just a moment ago had now arrived at a place filled with water. The air was filled with dense water vapor, and even Xiao Hua had the urge to jump into the water to play. However, right behind them, the scroll had already been rolled up, and its speed was much faster than when it was unfolded. The sound of the bugle horn was getting more urgent, as if it was urging everyone to quickly fly to the island. Not good. I can't use my divine sense. Xiao Hua, who had been using his divine sense to keep a lookout, suddenly felt a strong wave coming from the scroll, covering everything within 100 miles. His divine sense was immediately confined within his body, and could no longer be released. Quick, Fairy Hongxia was also a little anxious. It's not easy to open the ancestral shrine's door once. Although the jade didn't mention the interval between the second opening, but it definitely won't let us open it a second time so easily. As she spoke, Fairy Hongxia once again activated her flying technique, wanting to increase her speed. "Let me do it." Xiao Hua pulled Fairy Hongxia's hand and whispered, "Don't use your magic." Okay, Fairy Hongxia knew that Xiao Hua's lightning evasion was very fast, so she obediently passed her hand to Xiao Hua and retracted her magic. Rumble, a burst of lightning flashed around Xiao Hua's body, but just as Xiao Hua was about to activate the lightning evasion technique, Li Zongbao shouted from afar, "Junior brother Xiao, you can't use the lightning evasion technique." Oh. Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback as he hastily turned his head around. Sure enough, right behind him, due to the appearance of the lightning, hundreds of cracks had actually appeared on the bright and beautiful scenery. Furthermore, the cracks were growing larger and larger, as if the entire scenery was about to be torn apart. Darling Xiao, Fairy Hongxia also hurriedly shouted. Let this concubine fly over by herself. Haha, no need, watch this Xiao. Xiao Hua saw that the lightning evasion was too overbearing, and the scroll was actually unable to withstand it. He immediately activated his wind evasion and like a breeze he blew towards the island. The island looked very close, but when he really flew he realized that it was extremely far away. Xiao Hua flew for half the time of a meal before he reached it. Husband, let's split up and look for it. It's a phoenix totem. Fairy Hongxia clearly did not expect that her spiritual will could not be used, and was a little flustered. The moment she landed on the island, she did not have the time to look carefully, and immediately said to Xiao Hua, while she herself flew towards a direction. Okay, Xiao Hua was clearly not satisfied with Fairy Hongxia's preparations, but he could not say anything. He casually agreed, and was about to fly away, but when he saw Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao in the distance he sighed. These two sigh, I should still use the flowing cloud flying ship. Forget it, let's search first, and wait for the two of them to arrive. Chapter 28:37. After the time it takes to eat a meal, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao finally arrived. Just behind them, the clouds and clouds in the sky changed dramatically, and all the scenery was engulfed in it. It was like a giant mouth that wanted to swallow everything. Quick, senior brother, quickly find a phoenix totem. That's the entrance to the Kai family's ancestral shrine. Xiao Hua had already searched nearby, but he didn't find any traces, so he flew over and urged. Okay. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao both agreed, and hurriedly flew in two different directions. While Li Zongbao was flying, he occasionally looked back, and when he saw the sky full of celestial phenomena, he was slightly stunned and whispered. This seems to be a kind of array. Xiao Hua was right next to him, and he hurriedly replied, Senior brotherly, what time is it? Quickly find the entrance. If you can't find the entrance. Speaking up to here, Xiao Hua was stunned again, and a kind of fear appeared on his face. He shouted, Damn it, it can't be. If we can't find the entrance, we will. Quick. Even Li Zongbao had an epiphany, and he hurriedly said, Definitely. This Kai family's ancestral shrine is so important. How can it be easy to enter? If you don't have absolute confidence, and don't have the ability to enter the ancestral shrine, this ancestral shrine, I'm afraid it's a dead end. Damn Qingyang Kai family. Xiao Hua cursed. No wonder they didn't care when my wife took the jade pendant that leads to the ancestral shrine. So that's why. Li Zongbao also hurriedly flew away, and he didn't know if he noticed, but Xiao Hua actually called Fairy Hongxia wife, in front of him for the first time. When he first saw the island, when it was time to find it, he felt that it was extremely difficult. How could a small phoenix totem be easy to find? Xiao Hua, who had no sense of direction, searched for a long time, but he didn't have the slightest clue. At this time, the sky above the island was filled with countless remnant clouds and endless darkness. The previous scenery of the lake and mountains had now turned into wreckage floating in the air. Obviously, Scroll had reached the island, and her life was at stake. What should I do? What should I do? Xiao Hua frowned. This young master is known as the person with the best luck in the Dawn Rain continent. How can I not have a way? Holy shit, discerning eyes. Xiao Hua suddenly slapped his forehead as he came to a realization. Xiao Hua didn't know what happened to his Dharma eye after the last lightning tribulation, but it gradually became blurry. Xiao Hua had already forgotten about it. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be careless. He hurriedly opened his left hand and opened his Dharma eye. Sure enough, everything in the Dharma eye was blurry, as if it was covered by a thin veil, making it difficult to see clearly. However, although it was indistinct, he could still see through the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. A small, slender, and long brilliance appeared extremely far away. Senior martial brother Li Xiaomao, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and hastily flew towards the location of the brilliance while shouting loudly. Big brother, Xiao Mao was the first to come over after hearing the sound. Xiao Hua hurriedly said, Quickly go and find your senior sister. The totem is just ahead. Yes, Xiao Mao trusted Xiao Hua the most. He didn't even ask how Xiao Hua knew that she was in front. He quickly flew into the sky to look for Red Dawn Fairy. When Xiao Hua arrived, he discovered that this was a low-lying area. That one zhang tall phoenix totem was actually stuck in the depths. If Xiaohua didn't see it, how could he find this place? Seeing the totem, Xiaohua let out a long sigh of relief. He opened his Dharma eye and looked down again. It was an extremely small, thumb-sized brilliance that went straight down this. How do I go in? Xiaohua was a little confused. Not long later, Red Dawn Fairy indeed followed Xiao Mao and flew over. Li Zongbao also rushed over. Xiaohua, it's all thanks to you. Seeing that the phoenix totem was so hard to find, Red Dawn Fairy couldn't help but rejoice that she brought Xiaohua over. Sayu, why didn't you consider this situation earlier? Xiaohua couldn't help but grumble. Red Dawn Fairy said apologetically. Xiaohua, wait a moment, I'll explain slowly. As she spoke, Red Dawn Fairy put her fair index finger in her mouth and bit it. A smear of blood flowed out from the tip of her finger. Red Dawn Fairy squatted down and smeared the blood on the eyes of the phoenix totem. Buzz buzz. When the blood from her finger landed on the eyes of the phoenix, it immediately emitted a blood-red glow. The eyes actually moved slightly, and the blood-red glow began to spread towards the totem. Phew, Red Dawn Fairy let out a sigh of relief. She looked up and saw that the wave-like dark clouds were not far away from them. She then said, Xiaohua, I've prepared a lot before coming here, but the ancestral shrine of the Kai family is very mysterious. This totem and the scroll just now were not recorded in the jade amulet. It might have been passed down orally by the patriarch. I'm not a direct descendant of the Kai family of Qingyang, so I can't know about this secret. Also, Million Mountain Meng, I've deliberately investigated it in the Sky Patrol City, but who would have thought? Million Mountain Meng actually looks like this. It's completely different from what I've imagined. Big brother, Xiao Mao laughed. I seem to have been born here. I don't even know what Million Mountain Meng looks like, let alone senior sister. Besides, if the Sky Patrol City can spy on Million Mountain Meng, doesn't that mean that everyone knows about the war between the soul cultivators and the sword cultivators? Xiao Mao then said, by the way, I wonder if Miss Jiuxia has delivered the communication talisman? The sword Dao war should be ending soon, right? How can it be so fast? Xiaohua shook his head and said, I think it'll take a while more. If the nascent soul masters receive the news and know about the sword cultivator's intentions, I'm afraid the war will really end. Our Dao sect will be able to recoup the losses of the first stage. I hope that's the case. Li Zongbao did not seem optimistic. Why? Xiaohua was about to ask this question. Suddenly, a rumbling sound that sounded like the collapse of a mountain was heard from above their heads. Countless hurricanes swept across the sky like a mountain pressing down on them. Hurry, hurry! The four of them could not help but shout in their hearts. When they looked at the totem again, it was already filled with blood threads and gradually began to spin. Clang! The sound of metal clanging resounded through the entire area. A clear light soared into the sky. That light spun rapidly, creating an extremely strong suction force. Xiaohua and the others couldn't resist, and were sucked into it. Even the hurricane that was already pressing down on everyone's heads was pulled in. When the hurricanes fell into the brilliance suddenly retracted. When the brilliance fell into the depression, the phoenix totem that was previously revealed had already disappeared. Moreover, the entire island was torn into pieces by the hurricanes. No trace of it could be seen anymore. Then, when he looked at the 100 miles deep depression in Mount Meng, as the scroll was rolled up, all the sceneries disappeared, and the place returned to its original barren state. It seemed that no one would know that the four cultivators of the Dao sect had been here. No one would know that there was actually a fallen ancestral temple of a cultivator clan in Million Mountain Meng. Even if Yi Yu was thousands of miles away, he would not know that the Xiao Mao that he had been thinking about was actually not far away from him. Yi Yu was different from before. The black clothes he was wearing were not sword armor. They were actually similar to what Xiao Mao was wearing now. The only difference was that there were fewer tassels on the black clothes, and the patterns were different as well. Of course, Yi Yu was not flying on his sword. Instead, he was riding on a huge spirit beast. This spirit beast had a wingspan of over 200 feet. Its head was a few feet in size and looked extremely ferocious. From its wide mouth, Drops of beast saliva that were larger than a fist dripped down from its sharp teeth, emitting an unpleasant stench. Alu, Yiyu stood firmly on the head of the spirit beast. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and asked in a low voice, "That guy's actions, are they really so difficult to find out?" Beside Yiyu were the disciples who had flown into Million Mountain Meng with him. These disciples had also changed their attire. One of the disciples who was closer to Yiyu smiled bitterly when he heard Yiyu's question. "Master, this lowly one seems to have told you a few times, right?" Night Rain's tone was cold. That disciple's face was filled with fear, and he hurriedly said with a smile, "All right, Sect Master knows. After I received Sect Master's orders, I quietly approached Xiao. You should know that these cultivators of the Dao sect have powerful divine abilities. This lowly one is far from being a match for them. This lowly one did not dare to get too close and could only follow from afar. So far, this lowly one did not even know how far away he was. Furthermore, this lowly one did not really understand the language of Meng Mountains. It was only later, when Sam brought a native from Kinji village, that this lowly one was able to find out more about that person's actions." When Alu said this, he carefully looked at Yiyu's face. When he saw that Yiyu did not show any reaction, he had no choice but to continue. However, he had already said this many times, so he was not afraid of making a mistake. He looked at the flapping wings of the spirit beast under his feet and said smoothly, "That person seemed to have not gone straight to Shebi village after entering Meng Mountains. He did not even go to Shang village. Instead, he quietly headed toward a small village called Bayan village. Furthermore, the strange thing was, that person's information disappeared from Bayan village. It was as if he had never been there. Naturally, this lowly one did not dare to go to Bayan village myself. I could only ask that native to help me find out." At this point, Alu rolled his eyes and asked tentatively, "Master, perhaps that person has already gone back?" This lowly one heard from that native that a few days ago, Bayan village was attacked by beetles near Bayan village. On top of that, there was also the sound of heavenly thunder that rushed out of Meng Mountains. Could it be that that person saw how terrifying Meng Mountains were, and how they could not deal with the beetles that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, so they went back with their tails between their legs? How is that possible? Yiyu turned his head and said coldly, "Why did that person come to Meng Mountains? Do you think he came here with me like you? What kind of bullshit relationship do that terrifying phoenix, Li Zongbao, Kai Hongxia, and the others have with Meng Mountains? If that person did not know about his origin and the secret of this place, would he travel thousands of miles to Meng Mountains? You must know, the journey from Sky Patrol City to Meng Mountains is extremely arduous. If he did not know that everything here is under his control, would he be willing to take the risk? Please forgive me if there are any mistakes." Chapter 2838. My lord, Alu showed a flattering expression and said with a smile, "You've already taken control of Shibai village. Even if that person returns to Meng Mountains and Shibai village, what can he do? Don't you just need to say a few words for everything? How can you be afraid of him?" "What do you know?" Yiyu sneered. "This is Meng Mountains, not the sword domain. Strength doesn't determine everything. It wasn't easy for me to build such a good foundation here. How can I let that little kid ruin everything? Do you know that all mistakes start from a trace of carelessness?" Then, Yiyu shifted his gaze from the distance and looked at Alu with a smile in his eyes, asking, "What else? What else?" Alu was startled and quickly said with a smile, "My lord, I've already told you so many times. What's there to hide? You won't suspect that I am that person." "Hee, of course I won't suspect you." Yiyu laughed, but then said with a deeper meaning, "However, the situation now is different from before. What I need is someone who can do things honestly. Alu, you followed me for so long. You should know my temper. I've already given you several chances, but you don't seem to have grasped them even once." My lord, Alu's expression changed greatly. He was so scared that he quickly knelt down on the soul beast and wanted to argue. "Achi, tell him where that person is." Yiyu didn't even look at Alu and said to the disciple who had been standing there silently and looking into the distance, "Yes, Hearing Yi Yu's order, Achi hurriedly bowed and said, "This lowly one has received orders from my lord to split up with Alu. This lowly one knows that this matter is very important to my lord, so I didn't dare to neglect it. I personally made a trip to the Jing Apple village. First, I invited a native that this lowly one knew to go to the Bai and stronghold to inquire. In addition, this lowly one was afraid that this native wouldn't be able to obtain any useful information. So I spent some effort to invite a somewhat famous soul warrior in the Jing Apple village." At this point, Achi hesitated and glanced at Alu. "Continue." Yi Yu ordered indifferently. "Yes." Achi clenched his teeth and said, "I didn't get any useful information from that aborigine. It seems that those aborigines are very supportive of that person. And they all kept their mouths shut, as if that person disappeared before he even reached Baiyan village. But from the mouth of that soul warrior, this humble one learned a completely different piece of information." See, when Alu heard this, he fell to his knees with a plop. His forehead was covered with sweat as he cried out, "My lord, this lowly one was negligent. This lowly one made a mistake. Please punish me, my lord." Lil 7 glanced at Lil 6, and a trace of mockery flashed across his eyes. He said again, "After hearing this news, I really understand why the Lord values this matter so much, and also why the Lord wants to send me to the Bai and stronghold. If the Lord doesn't know about this, I'm afraid the Lord will be abnormally passive." Then, Achi roughly explained the situation of Xiao Mao and the others in Baiyan village. Other than the incident in Su Garden, most of the information was the same. Finally, Achi said, "The 5 people who entered Ming Mountains seem to have a conflict. That extremely beautiful woman flew out of Ming Mountains, and the terrifying phoenix actually used the lightning escape technique to chase after her. My lord, you are really wise. That woman's cultivation seems to be far superior to the terrifying phoenix. If they fought at Drifting Cloud Lake, we would definitely die. When the terrifying phoenix returned, that woman didn't appear again. Clearly, she had left Ming Mountains. That person also left not long after, but that soul warrior didn't know where they went. Because when that person left, other than Elder Wu and G-Man, no one else knew. The other soul warriors only guessed because they couldn't see that person. Of course, this humble one also asked that soul warrior to make some more inquiries when he returned to Jing Apple village. After all, that is the only way to Shi Baiyan village. But from the information brought by the soul beast a few days ago, they didn't pass by Jing Apple village. My lord, please punish this humble one for not being able to find out more specific movements." Alu Yu smiled and said, "Did you hear that? What do you think is the difference between what you found out and what Achi found out?" Alu's sweat fell like rain. He was very clear in his heart that he had really made a mistake this time. Night Rain had placed too much importance on this matter. She actually sent Achi to investigate after him. She was afraid that she would reveal that person's whereabouts. And he had been too careless, only sending a native to investigate, and ended the matter carelessly. Of course, from his point of view, it wasn't considered carelessness. It was just that he hadn't thought it through. "My lord, it's all my fault." Alu didn't dare to argue and hurriedly said, "It's all my fault." However, if this humble one was in Achi's place, this humble one would definitely be able to do better. You're right," Yi Yu said lightly. "If it was any other time, this lord wouldn't punish you like this. But it's different today. You've seen it yourself. That man has won the hearts of the natives. And to tell you the truth, that man is the descendant of the great god Shibai. His bloodline is extremely pure, and he is my enemy. Once the news of his arrival in Ming Mountains is spread out, all the natives of Shibai village will have to bow their heads and listen to his orders. So the ones we can use are only a few soul warriors. Remember, only those soul warriors who have cultivated some soul spells will have different thoughts from the natives. We can only use this. This is a moment of life and death for this lord. This lord won't allow any mistakes." Yes, everyone's heart trembled as they answered in unison. As for Alu, Yi Yu said lightly, "Along the way, why would this lord ask you so many times for no reason? This lord has given you so many chances." My lord, Alu suddenly felt that something was wrong. So he quickly knelt down and begged. Too bad. You're always slacking off, and you're still like this today. Yu's face suddenly turned ferocious. If it wasn't for Ah Chi's probing today, this lord would still be in the dark, right? My lord, Alu shouted. My lord, please puff. A pale golden sword beam came out of Yu's mouth and pierced into Alu's forehead. Alu didn't have any chance to resist or dodge. Humph, Yu put away the small sword and kicked Alu's corpse off the soul beast. Then he glanced at the others and snorted coldly. All of you have lived peacefully outside of Meng Mountains for nearly 10 years. Now this is a moment of life and death. If this lord succeeds, then I'll settle down in Meng Mountains. But if this lord fails, all of you won't be able to live either. All of you will have to rack your brains and follow this lord to kill that man. Otherwise, all of you will end up like Alu. Yes, everyone bowed their heads and replied. As for Yu, he raised his head and looked in the direction outside of Meng Mountains. Then he viciously said, Third uncle, oh third uncle. Back then you made it very clear that bastard's everything was taken care of by you. That's why this lord was tricked into coming here. But now, that little bastard is still alive in this world. You, what kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Coo. While Yu was talking to himself, the soul beast under his feet let out an extremely strange sound. After the sound of the beast's cry faded away, the sound of the beast's cry became louder and louder. It didn't stop for a moment, and it sounded like a frog singing in a pond. Following that, several strange-looking soul beasts began to appear within 100 kilometers of the city. On the back of each soul beast stood several strangely dressed soul warriors. Of course, the clothes of these soul warriors were different from each other. 30% of the soul warriors wore clothes that were similar to Yu's, with only a small difference. The other 70% of the soul warriors wore clothes that were completely different from Yu's. These soul warriors' clothes were very neat and tidy. They were symmetrical on both sides, and had very few decorations. In the middle of their smooth robes, there was even a silk ribbon that looked like a belt. Even more strange was the fact that these soul warriors had their hair tied together. Some of them had their hair tied up with hairpins, while others had their hair tied up with a cloth. Coo, the sound of a pigeon's cry could be heard again. Then a giant soul beast with pure white feathers over its body flew over from the distance. On the back of this soul beast was a man wearing white soul armor. He held a bone fan in his hand, and had a smile on his face as he flew towards Yu's location. Seeing this man coming over, Yu hurriedly put on a smile on his face. With a tap of his foot, the soul beast flapped its wings and slowly came to a stop in midair. It's been a long time since we last met. Fu Man Hoyan pays his respects here. The soul warrior didn't speak the strange language of Meng Mountains, but the language commonly used in sword domain. Greetings, old brother Hoyan, Yu said with a smile. The last time I saw old brother was 10 years ago. I didn't think that 10 years would pass in the blink of an eye. Old brother's magnificence is still the same as before. This one is truly envious. Haha, you're too kind. Hoyan laughed and waved his hand. How can this little brother's stinky skin compare to Fu Man's? Who doesn't know that Fu Man of Shibai village is a brave and intelligent warrior? If Fu Man didn't have such intelligence, how could G-Man have taken a fancy to him? You flatter me. Yu laughed. This one is only living in Shibai village. How can I compare to old brother Hoyan, who is a direct descendant of Back Earth village? Old brother Hoyan has found a concubine. Wouldn't your children be G-Man and Elder Wu? Hoyan's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly looked around and said, Fu Man, my wife isn't a concubine. Please be lenient with your words. Don't speak nonsense. If others know about this, I will have a miserable life. So what? Yu laughed in a low voice. Chapter 28:39. How could Hoyan dare to let him continue? Then he quickly added, Oh right, I have to thank Fu Man. This place is under the jurisdiction of Shibai village, and we shouldn't have gone too deep into it. But now, the battle with the sword. The sword cultivators is too intense, and I'm afraid that Shibai village can't organize too many soul warriors. That's why I've decided to send more soul warriors here. I just wanted to greet G-Man. But I didn't expect that G-Man would be willing to send Fu-Man here. I'm really surprised. Hee. Ho-Tu Village's reaction is Shibai Village's problem, and Shibai Village's problem is also Ho-Tu Village's problem. Yi Yu smiled and said, I didn't expect that. The reason for the drought in Meng Mountains is because of this. Since Ho-Tu Village is eradicating the evil for the people of Meng Mountains, how can Shibai Village not contribute? I've just returned from Meng Mountains, and I've received G-Man's order to come here and meet you. Once this is done, you and I will both be the heroes of Meng Mountains. Let's not talk about my Fu-Man but what you think. You should be confident, right? Ah. I hope you and I can succeed. Ho Yen laughed. Also Yi Yu's smile faded, and his face turned cold. My clan was wiped out by sword cultivators. I'm the one who was born, and I've made it my life's goal to avenge my clan. Sword Realm swordsmen, they have nothing to do with me. I'm just a Fu-Man from Shibai Village. Yes, Fu-Man is right. It's all my fault. Ho Yen smiled and said, after this mission is over, I'll hold a banquet in Ho-Tu Village to apologize. That won't be necessary. A smile appeared on Yi Yu's face as he waved his hand and said, from now on I'll just treat myself as a member of Meng Mountains, and have no other thoughts. That's why, when you called me, I rushed here. Not only do I want to help you, but I also want to erase the evil from Meng Mountains, and return Meng Mountains to its former glory. Good. Ho Yen clapped his hands and said, the more Fu-Man talks, the more I feel that I'm wrong. If Fu-Man needs anything in the future, please let me know. Hee brother Ho Yen, are you serious? Ho Yen's words were perfunctory, but Yi Yu asked. Oh. When Ho Yen heard this, he was slightly stunned. Immediately, a trace of realization appeared on his face. He said with a fake smile, Fu-Man, I feel that something is wrong. How could you leave the Shibai stronghold so easily? Even if it was little brother's message and that item, it was impossible for Fu-Man to come here personally. So Fu-Man was waiting for me here. Hee brother, I've been searching all over Meng Mountains, but I couldn't find anyone I could entrust this task to. Then when I saw brother's message, my eyes lit up. So, I immediately urged all the people in the village to come and help you. Yi Yu said with a smile. Then he looked around and whispered, of course, if you need my help in the future, the people of Shibai Village will support you unconditionally. Ho Yen rolled his eyes and looked at Night Rain and the disciples on Night Rain's back. He smiled and said, since Fu-Man is in trouble, how can I not help? Fu-Man, please come over. I would like to hear what you have to say. Good. Yi Yu didn't hesitate, and with a flash of sword light, she landed on Ho Yan's soul beast. Ho Yan's soul beast spread its wings and flew away from the other spirit warriors. After Yi Yu finished speaking, Ho Yan's face was filled with shock. Without thinking, he waved his hand and said, Fu-Man, this is your Shibai Village's internal affairs. I am the heir of the Ho-Tu Village. How can I casually participate? I can't. Hee. Brother Night Rain seemed to have expected Ho Yan's reaction. A strange smile appeared on his face. He whispered, although this is my Shibai Village's internal affair, but it's also Meng Mountain's internal affair. You seem to know the relationship between Shibai Village and Ho-Tu Village better than I do. In fact, I don't need to say anything else. You have a lot of heirs in Back Earth Village. There are many behind you, but there aren't many ahead of you. Why did you work so hard for so many years? Is it to find the reason for the drought in Meng Mountains? If it's really so noble and simple, just pretend I didn't say anything. I'll turn around and leave. After saying that, Night Rain paused for a moment. He glanced at Ho Yen, who seemed to be thinking about something. Then he smiled and said, being able to work for Meng Mountains is naturally our goal. But if we can get the support of the people of Wu Village, get their respect, and get the position of Grand Wu under their support, then we can do more things for them. Isn't that better? As far as I know, your Ho-Tu Village will soon decide the next Grand Wu or G-Man. That Ho Ming and Ho Yi seems to have something going on. That's why Brother Ho Yen is so active in preparing for this, hoping that you can do something about the drought in Meng Mountains. If you didn't have this opportunity, you wouldn't have sent a message to Shibai Village, would you? While speaking, Night Rain was observing Ho Yan's expression. Isn't this the reason why I came to you? Isn't it because we're in the same situation? You and I can only work together and support each other. Only then can we do something great in Ming Mountains. Sigh, the situation of my Ho-Tu village is not as simple as you think. Ho Yen finally opened his mouth. Ha ha ha. Night Rain didn't wait for him to finish. He laughed and said, simple things are complicated when you think about them, and complicated things are simple when you do them. Brother Ho Yen, I've given you my heart today, and I'm sincerely here to form an alliance with you. No matter how simple or complicated your problem is, I'll face it with you. As for me, I'm just asking you to kill a man you don't even know. This man is a cultivator. He's the enemy of Ming Mountains. What are you worried about? In fact, if I didn't want to be honest with you, I'd just say he's a cultivator. How would you know? Fine. Ho Yan's face showed a strange expression. He nodded and said, since he's a cultivator, it's fine. But if he's recognized by G-Man of Shibai village, then don't blame me. Hearing this, Night Rain was overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, of course, I won't fight with my brother. Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, a loud beast cry sounded in the distance. It sounded a little tragic. Ho Yan's expression changed slightly and he said anxiously, Fu Man, quick, it seems that a boy has found that guy. We can't let him run away, okay? Hearing the beast cry, Night Rain's heart skipped a beat. Since he had reached an agreement with Ho Yan, he knew that this matter was very important to both him and Ho Yan. He didn't delay and flew back to his spirit beast. Without hesitation, he stepped on the ground. The spirit beast flapped its wings again and flew toward the beast cry. Ho Yan's spirit beast seemed to be even faster. It was already more than 10 feet away from him. This millions of people in Ming Mountains were worried about Xiao Mao's arrival at Yiyu. They did not know where Xiao Mao had gone to. At this moment, Xiao Mao was floating in an unknown space. His ears were silent, and his limbs were motionless. He was staring dumbfoundedly at the unimaginably huge phoenix above his head. Yes, the phoenix totem on the island had turned into a huge suction force. Xiao Mao couldn't resist at all, and was sucked into it. Under the suction force, Xiao Mao's body kept rolling. It seemed that he couldn't stop. When the suction force disappeared, an indescribable feeling arose in his heart. If he was on the ground, an irresistible suction force would pull him firmly to the ground. If he wanted to move forward, he would have to lift his feet with all his strength. Even if a cultivator could fly, it would still consume his dharma power. However, in this place, the suction force that he was used to had completely disappeared. A feeling of freedom appeared, and this freedom made Xiao Mao unable to get used to it. His body was almost unable to move. He wanted to lift his feet, but before he could lift them, his whole body was lying down. He wanted to lift his hands, but his whole body was tilting slightly. The most terrifying thing was that the energy that was flowing freely in his meridians was now in the same state as him. It was floating in the air in his meridians, as if it didn't listen to the circulation of his heart technique. What should I do? Xiao Mao was very anxious. When he looked around, an indescribable light flashed above his head. Xiao Mao only raised his head slightly, and an inconceivable feeling arose in his heart. Above his head, there was a huge phoenix. The size of this phoenix had long surpassed his imagination. 10,000 miles in size. 1,000,000 miles in size. Xiao Mao couldn't measure it, but he could clearly see that even the smallest cold feather on the phoenix was as huge as a mountain range. He was more insignificant than a little ant. Although the phoenix didn't move, a majestic aura and a light screen as vast as the sea enveloped this space. Outside this light screen, there was endless darkness. It was so dark that it made one's heart tremble. So dark that it made one's heart feel unsettled. Xiao Mao's voice as small as an ant sounded in his ears. Oh, Xiao Mao was startled. He opened his mouth to respond, but he could only open his mouth. He couldn't make a single sound. Sound transmission. Xiao Hua's voice sounded. Xiao Mao suddenly woke up and turned his head to look elsewhere. When he saw Xiao Hua's situation clearly, he couldn't help but laugh. Xiao Hua seemed to be in an even more sorry state than Xiao Mao. His head was facing Xiao Mao, and his feet were facing up. It was no different from being upside down. Moreover, the the clothes that were lifted up didn't cover Xiaohua's head. Instead, it was casually spread out like a flower in full bloom. As for the voice from before, not a single word could be heard. Chapter 2840. What are you laughing at? Xiaohua's voice was heard again, sounding very strange. Big brother, Xiao Mao held back his laughter and said, "Why are you upside down? It looks very strange." "My head is upside down? Are you sure? Look for yourself. It's your head that's upside down." Xiaohua finally understood why Xiao Mao was laughing, and he also started laughing. "Me?" Xiao Mao was stunned, and looked to his other side with difficulty. Indeed, Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia were standing there with their heads down, looking at his feet in disbelief. It seemed that Xiao Mao's head was really upside down. "Damn it, this place is very strange." Xiao Mao laughed. "How can you tell up from down? We're all upside down." While he was speaking, Xiaohua's figure suddenly moved horizontally and flew towards a certain direction. Moreover, it was extremely slow, as if it was not strenuous at all. After flying for a moment, he suddenly stopped, and then flew towards Xiao Mao again. "Big brother. How can you fly? Little brother's true yuan can't move." Xiao Mao asked curiously. "Hee, I'm afraid you won't be able to learn it." Xiaohua laughed. "Why can't little brother learn it?" Xiao Mao asked curiously. "It's very simple. I didn't use any flying technique. I just drew out the true essence from my Jindan and pushed it in one direction. Then my body easily flew in another direction." Xiaohua shrugged his shoulders with some difficulty and said with a smile, "So it's like that." Xiao Mao was helpless. At this moment, Fairy Hongxia opened her mouth again, as if saying something to Xiaohua. Xiaohua didn't bother to say anything to Xiao Mao, and floated towards Fairy Hongxia's side. However, Xiaohua only flew for about 10 feet, and a crimson-red brilliance suddenly bloomed around Fairy Hongxia's body. That brilliance was the color of blood, and was abnormally gorgeous, as if a fresh flower had suddenly appeared in the air. Although the blood-colored brilliance was poignant and beautiful, within the brilliance, Fairy Hongxia's face revealed an inexplicable expression. Xiaohua, who was doing his best to activate his Jindan, was also stunned. Immediately, a kind of incomparable fear arose from the bottom of his heart. "This is bad." Xiaohua hurriedly looked around, as if he was trying to find the source of the danger. However, before he could see anything, the blood light around Fairy Hongxia's body suddenly stretched out, like a burning pillar of fire being blown up by the wind, floating straight towards the phoenix. In the silent space, a sudden vibration was produced. A sound that directly penetrated into Xiaohua's heart came from under his feet. Immediately after, an extremely strong gravitational force came from the phoenix. It was like a huge hand that didn't allow Xiaohua to resist in the slightest, as it firmly grabbed him and pulled him towards the phoenix with all its strength. Xiaohua was greatly shocked. He had great strength to begin with, so he was very clear about the difference between magic power and strength. He knew this kind of pure strength didn't have any fluctuation of magic power. It was basically a kind of strength between himself and the phoenix. This kind of strength was so vast and so unparalleled. Even if Xiaohua converted all the magic power in his body into strength, he still wouldn't be able to contend against it. Is this the power of heaven and earth? Xiaohua looked at the phoenix that was gradually being pulled closer and closer in disbelief. An indescribable vibration, and gradually, heat rose from his body. Not good. Xiaohua was slightly shocked. He hurriedly mobilized his magic power again. Unfortunately, the magic power seemed to be intermittent and couldn't support the protective golden light around him. Looking at Xiaohua's surroundings, Fairy Hongxia and the rest were also in the same position as Xiaohua. However, Fairy Hongxia's body was shrouded in a crimson glow. The glow flickered, protecting Fairy Hongxia tightly. "I see." Xiaohua understood. This blood-colored brilliance was a kind of protection. It was to protect Fairy Hongxia, who had entered this space, and also to protect the descendants of the Kai family and the Ice Phoenix bloodline. As for himself and the rest, he had no relationship with the Kai family at all. Of course, he would be listed as an enemy by the Kai family's ancestral shrine. This kind of method was the best way to eliminate the enemy and screen the descendants. Woo! A sharp sound came from Xiaohua's ears, and a faint fiery light began to appear around Xiaohua's body. It was precisely Xiaohua's protective light that was produced due to the friction with the surrounding air as it fell at an extremely fast speed. Big brother at this time, Xiaohua also heard Xiao Mao's shout, but he saw that Xiao Mao was still following beside him with his head down. His whole body was also on fire, and Xiao Mao's clothes had already started to burn. Innate primordial water. Almost immediately, Xiaohua thought of the innate primordial water in the clear water bottle. Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly tried to activate the Buddha Sarira. Xiaohua thought that the Buddha Sarira would be as simple as primordial energy. Who would have thought that the Buddha Sarira would be the same as usual? It did not take much effort to activate it. The innate primordial water was like a light blue water curtain, protecting Xiaohua and the rest. Xiaolang, let me out quickly. Unexpectedly, Fairy Hongxia said anxiously in just a moment. Under the innate primordial water, I can't sense the guidance of the ancestral phoenix statue. Okay. Xiaohua knew the power of the innate primordial water. He hurriedly withdrew it from Fairy Hongxia's side. Rumble, the vibrations grew louder, and the group's speed became faster. Under the suction force, the innate primordial water was pulled into thin strips, and directly crashed into the phoenix. Big brother, Xiao Mao was extremely panicked. He whispered, the speed is getting faster, much faster than our flying speed. To crash into the phoenix like this. How strong is the force? Will our bodies be able to withstand it? Don't worry, Xiaohua had experienced this before. He said calmly, flying speed is not a problem. The key is to protect yourself while flying. Didn't your senior sister also crash into the phoenix? She has the protection of the phoenix bloodline. If she also crashed into the phoenix, who in the Kai family would be able to enter the ancestral hall? According to Big Brother's opinion, there will be changes even before we crash into the phoenix. Why don't you take this opportunity to comprehend some of the flying speed? Oh, okay, Xiao Mao nodded blankly. However, in his heart he was puzzled. This flying speed. What is there to comprehend? Yes, no matter how fast this flying speed was, what could be comprehended? Not to mention Xiao Mao, even Li Zongbao couldn't comprehend the mysteries of flight. Only Xiaohua closed his eyes after speaking to Xiao Mao. He didn't release his divine sense or anything like that. He carefully experienced the changes in his body and the changes in his surroundings during this extremely fast flight. After all, in this lifetime, there were very few opportunities to fly at this speed. Even with Xiaohua's Imperial Thunder transformation, it was impossible for him to reach this speed. Even the slightest bit of understanding would be extremely beneficial for him to step into the Imperial Lightning Shock. Woo! Outside of the innate primordial water, the air was rubbing against the surface of the innate primordial water, producing an unparalleled heat. A sharp, ear-splitting sound was gradually heard. Beside the azure water light of Xiaohua and the others, Fairy Hongxia's blood-red light was also swaying, dragging an extremely long tail. The four of them split into two groups, rushing towards the phoenix like a large and small meteor. Jie, a phoenix cry resounded through the entire space. Suddenly, a strong light appeared from the phoenix's forehead. The misty light scattered over the surface of the phoenix, as if covering the sky. It rushed towards Xiaohua and the others. Light. Light escape. Xiaohua was familiar with the sunlight on the Dawn Rain continent. Moreover, he had also seen the sun rise in the early morning. However, in this pitch-black space, that light had already appeared out of thin air, covering the sky and covering the earth. It was something he had never seen before. The instant he saw this light, Xiaohua was immediately stunned. He couldn't help but roar in his heart. This is light escape. The escape technique that fuses the body with light. It's a light escape technique that can be used even in the void and darkness. As long as there's light reaching a place, it can use the light escape technique. Following Xiaohua's groan, as the light passed through the darkness and sprinkled on everyone's bodies like thin threads, an indescribable feeling arose in Xiaohua's heart. Xiaohua's entire body, from his skin to his meridians, from his flesh to his bones, seemed to be filled with light. A feeling of fullness, a feeling of ascension was born. Xiaohua couldn't help but groan. His chest was instantly filled with a surge of excitement, making him want to stretch out his neck and sing loudly. Boom. There was a loud sound, as if Xiaohua's body had exploded inside, but also as if it had exploded outside of Xiaohua's body. Suddenly, everything came to a standstill, whether it was his body, his thoughts, or time. Xiaohua still had his eyes closed. He was unwilling to break away from the wonderful feeling just now. Although the light in his body was slowly fading away, that intense void was replacing it. Big brother Xiao Mao called out with some hesitation. Beside him, Li Zongbao hurriedly pointed his hand and transmitted his voice. Quiet. Xiao Mao was stunned and quickly shut his mouth. However, Xiaohua had already opened his eyes. A thoughtful light flashed in his eyes, and he said with a smile, "It's already too late." Immediately after, Xiaohua looked around and saw that this was a space of unknown size. Outside this space, there were countless rays of light flowing, very similar to the gorgeous brilliance in the night sky of Huan country. Looking at the space, there were many specks of stars floating above. These specks of stars all had the same appearance, and they were square tokens. There were faint fluctuations coming from these tokens, and occasionally, there would be faint phoenix patterns appearing from time to time. This is the Kai family's ancestral hall? Xiaohua was really stunned. It wasn't that he hadn't seen an ancestral hall before. An ordinary ancestral hall, like Zhongling Mountain Village, was an ancestral hall with the tablets of the ancestors placed there. A slightly more bizarre ancestral hall, like the one in Yellowflower Ridge, was a palace with the tablets of the previous headmasters placed there, as well as the mysterious gods that were worshipped. When he came, Xiaohua had already imagined the Kai family's ancestral hall. However, he thought that Qingyang's Kai family was at most similar to Zhongling Mountain Village. This ancestral hall was a secret ancestral hall, or perhaps there was a rather large palace under the ancestral hall. Chapter 2841. However, Xiaohua did not expect the Kai family's ancestral shrine to be far beyond his expectations. How was this an ancestral shrine? It was even grander than the Xiankong Pavilion in Haoming City. Legacy Realm? Suddenly, Xiaohua thought of the legacy realm of the Yu family in Falling Gold Mountain. Looking at this scene, the Qingyang Kai family must be the descendants of the divine beast Phoenix. Their ancestral shrine already had such a scene. Then what about the so-called legacy realm of the Yu family in Falling Gold Mountain? That was the legacy realm that was known as an interface. Could this be related to the legacy realm? Xiaohua's eyes turned and looked around. In addition to these ranks, there were also colorful lights. Fairy Hongxia's figure was lying in midair, and this posture was used when she was practicing the flying shadow technique. Seeing Xiaohua looking around, Li Zongbao hurriedly transmitted his voice. "Junior brother, let's go down. Don't delay junior sister's comprehension." As he spoke, he took the lead and walked a few steps in the air. There seemed to be invisible stairs in the air. Sure enough, Xiaohua also walked a few steps and was actually far away from Fairy Hongxia. Hence, the three of them simply walked a few miles before stopping. Damn it, Xiao Mao was the first to speak. This Kai family is really rich. How can their ancestral shrine be so big? When I was in Xuanyan school, I really underestimated these cultivation families. Indeed. Even someone as knowledgeable as Li Zongbao nodded and said, "If junior sister didn't bring me here, I would also think that the Kai family was just an ordinary family. Why is the Kai family's ancestral shrine in Million Mountain Meng? How can it have such a grand scene? This array, what kind of divine ability is needed to set it up?" Xiaohua asked a few questions in one breath. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked at each other. Both of them had the same question in their hearts, but who could answer? "I only know that although this place is vast, its true size is no more than 50 kilometers. In fact, it's really the size of an ordinary clan's ancestral hall." Li Zongbao hesitated for a moment, then said in a low voice, "However, there's an array here that's similar to the Meru array, and it's shrinking us. As for this totem, even though it's only the size of a hill, in our eyes, it's comparable to the entire Dawn Rain continent." Sumeru formation? Xiao Mao was slightly taken aback. He asked curiously, "What kind of formation is that?" "Your storage pouch." Li Zongbao reminded. Many things, regardless of their size, can be stored in storage bags. This storage bag has a simple Sumeru array formation. So that's how it is. Xiao Mao came to a realization and looked around. What about now? Are we inside the Phoenix Totem? It should be. Xiao Hua nodded. That kind of extremely high-speed flight from before was like a teleportation array. When it reached a certain level, it teleported us into the Phoenix Totem. I've encountered such a powerful restriction before. However, he still had a lingering fear in his heart. But that huge suction force from the totem just now was really powerful. I don't know how this restriction was formed unexpectedly. Li Zongbao's words stunned Xiao Hua on the spot. I'm afraid it's the totem's own suction force on us? Of course, this suction force doesn't have any fluctuations of energy. It's naturally formed. It could really be the suction force of the Phoenix Totem. Jie, a clear cry faintly rang out. In the distance, Fairy Hongxia's body flashed brilliantly, and the crystal-clear Phoenix celestial body was released. Instantly, even Xiao Hua and the rest could see that countless fireflies were flying in from outside the space. They were like moths to a flame, and they all fell into Fairy Hongxia's celestial body. The celestial body immediately emitted the same brilliance as the Phoenix Totem outside the space. This brilliance was like breathing, and it was very uniform. More fireflies flew in, enveloping Fairy Hongxia's physical body and celestial body. An extremely beautiful cocoon of light was born around Fairy Hongxia's body. The brilliance continued to flash, and the fireflies continued to pour in. Very quickly, more than 10 days passed. The cocoon of light did not expand, but it gradually solidified. Xiao Hua and the rest closed their eyes and sat quietly in the distance, waiting for Fairy Hongxia to emerge from the cocoon. Whoosh whoosh suddenly, a sound like the rising and falling of the tide came from the cocoon of light. Cracks gradually appeared on the surface of the cocoon of light. These cracks rapidly expanded, and it collapsed rapidly. Jie, an extremely loud phoenix cry rang out again, as if there were two sounds at the same time. One was from the Phoenix Totem outside the space, and the other was from Fairy Hongxia's Phoenix celestial body. Following the phoenix cry, the collapsing cocoon of light suddenly retracted, and the entire cocoon of light was hidden within Fairy Hongxia's physical body. At the same time, a five-colored brilliance flashed across the sky, and a firework flashed across the sky, landing right on top of the cocoon of light. Fairy Hongxia's body continued to flash, and all the brilliance gathered in between her eyebrows. A blood-red phoenix the size of a thumb, spreading its wings and about to fly, appeared there. Looking at the sparkling and translucent phoenix celestial body, it had returned to its original state. The five-colored phenomenon from before had disappeared, and it looked the same as before. Moreover, the celestial body had shrunk to the size of 6 feet. Hee, Fairy Hongxia chuckled and looked up. She opened her mouth, and the five-colored brilliance fell into her mouth. Her body did not move, but with a flap of the phoenix celestial body's wings, she immediately flew to the side of Xiao Hua and the rest at lightning speed. My goodness, senior sister flew too fast. Xiao Mao and the rest had already stood up when they heard the commotion. Xiao Mao could not help but exclaim in shock. Hee, I have obtained the Phoenix legacy of my Kai family. I can move freely within the Phoenix enchantment. Fairy Hongxia said proudly. Good. Li Zongbao clapped. Congratulations, junior sister, for not making a wasted trip. Thank you, senior brother. It's all because of your help that I can come here safely. Fairy Hongxia bowed and thanked him. What is the Phoenix legacy? Can every descendant of the Kai family obtain it? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Not at all, Fairy Hongxia chuckled. Just like junior brother Xiao Mao. If one's bloodline is not pure, how can one obtain it? Or if one's cultivation does not reach a certain level, how can one enter the ancestral shrine? Moreover, my Kai family's Phoenix legacy should be different from junior brother's, who is the descendant of God Shibai. This Phoenix legacy can only be obtained by one person in every generation. Only when this person dies, will the inheritance divine light return to the ancestral shrine, and await the arrival of the next inheritor. So, amazing! Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. He looked at Xiao Mao and then at Fairy Hongxia. These two people's luck seemed to be better than his. They really had a good background. Better than anyone else. Actually, I don't know about all these. Fairy Hongxia smiled. I only wanted to come to the ancestral shrine to see if there were any opportunities. Only when I was guided by the Phoenix Legacy's divine light, and merged with the Phoenix Legacy, did I understand so much. Moreover, within the divine light, there are many other things which will be slowly unearthed as I cultivate. Senior sister's cultivation. Xiao Mao could not help but cast a spell. However, Fairy Hongxia's cultivation did not seem to have any special changes. Of course, my cultivation won't have any changes in a dozen days. Fairy Hongxia smiled. These 10 days are only the initial stages of merging with the divine light. When the divine light completely merges with me, my cultivation will gradually speed up. However, based on my estimation, I will definitely be able to step into the golden core stage by next year. As she spoke, Fairy Hongxia opened her mouth, and the 5-colored brilliance flew out and landed in her soft hands. The brilliance gradually disappeared, revealing the true form of a phoenix feather. This is my Kai family's phoenix token, Fairy Hongxia said happily. This is a feather that my ancestors obtained from the heavenly phoenix. Its profundity is endless. Congratulations, senior sister, Xiao Mao said happily. Everyone's luck is different. Junior brother's fate seems to be more powerful than mine. Fairy Hongxia held the phoenix token and said, I thought that coming to Meng Mountains was my business, but I did not expect that junior brother's business is more important than mine. She then looked at Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao and said embarrassedly. On the other hand, Xiao Lang and senior brother came empty-handed and returned empty-handed. As long as you have a chance encounter, wouldn't you be much stronger than me? Xiao Hua naturally understood that what he had obtained was not any less than Xiao Mao and Fairy Hongxia. He smiled and said, Senior brotherly, on the other hand, came here for nothing. Not at all. I even obtained a spirit item, Li Zongbao said. At this moment, the space began to vibrate. A repulsive force similar to the one before was produced. Don't worry, the Phoenix barrier is about to close, Fairy Hongxia said unhurriedly. Only when my Phoenix divine light returns will the Phoenix barrier have a chance to open. We don't need to struggle. We just need to let the barrier push us out. As soon as her voice fell, everyone's figures soared into the sky, flying out at a speed even faster than Xiao Hua's Imperial Thundershock. Only this time there were no sparks forming around them. Xiao Hua hurriedly closed his eyes, trying to comprehend the rare speed Gigi after an unknown amount of time. An extremely hot aura suddenly surrounded Xiao Hua. Moreover, before Xiao Hua could open his eyes, a very familiar sound of an ape's cry came from above his head. Then an unpleasant stench rushed into Xiao Hua's mouth and nose. This is Xiao Hua stared blankly. Before he could open his eyes and release his divine sense, a sharp sound that seemed to tear the air apart resounded from his forehead, and a piercing pain appeared on his skin. Xiao Hua's body was naturally surrounded by a protective golden light, but he did not dare to be careless. He shrank his head and curled his body into a ball. In an extremely strange posture, he flew to the side like a spinning windmill. Chapter 2842. Rip. An ear-piercing sound of silk being torn apart rang out. An extremely sharp force slashed right at Xiao Hua's right arm. Wherever the brilliance flashed, the golden light protecting his body was actually torn apart by this force, and the brilliance surrounding Xiao Hua's body was also extinguished. Fire ape. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. He immediately activated the wind escape technique and floated several zhang away. His gaze swept across, and sure enough he saw 100 zhang tall fire ape. This fire ape had an extremely ferocious face, and the wide mouth and fangs on its face were suffused with a kind of blood-red color. The fire ape's fur was golden yellow, and from time to time, flames would emerge from its fur, lingering around the fire ape. A tyrannical aura also enveloped the nearby area. Wasn't this the golden core stage fire ape from Flaming Forest Marsh? Why did this guy run to Million Man Mountain? Xiao Hua stood in midair. He swept with his divine sense, but didn't see the figures of Li Zongbao and the others. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. His gaze once again fell on the fire ape, and he thought very strangely. Looking at the fire ape again, within its wild and untamed eyes, there was clearly astonishment, as if it was as confused as Xiaohua. However, when it clearly saw Xiaohua's appearance, a kind of joy actually appeared in its eyes. Eho! A cheerful long howl, its bloody mouth rushed into the air, and a faint flame spurted out. Immediately after, it crossed its arms and hammered its own chest, causing sparks to fly out from its fur, as if they were blooming fireworks. Sun-Moon Corona, Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He immediately thought of the ancestral artifacts of Misty Mountain and Flying Phoenix Ridge. Those things seemed to have a restraining effect on the fire ape, and at the same time, the fire ape seemed to be somewhat interested in the Sun-Moon Corona. However, before Xiaohua could take out the Sun-Moon Corona, the fire ape not far away lowered its head and stared at Xiaohua with a fierce gaze. Flames flickered under its feet, and it flew towards Xiaohua. Its huge fists streaked across the air, and flames were also produced. It was like two fireballs were held in the fire ape's hand, and it rushed towards Xiaohua. Ha ha ha, I've already met you 3 times. Xiaohua laughed loudly. As the saying goes, there's only 1 time and 2 times, but not 3 times and 4 times. Now, I'll let you know how powerful I am. As he spoke, Xiaohua waved his hand and took out several fire talismans. He urged his magic power and threw them at the fire ape. Roar! The fire ape seemed to have understood Xiaohua's words. It let out a loud roar and a trace of disdain flashed through its eyes. Its giant hand was like a mountain as it smashed down toward Xiaohua, who was like a toy in its eyes. Rumble! The fire talisman itself didn't have much magic power fluctuation. When Xiaohua activated it, this time, it absorbed a huge amount of spiritual qi of heaven and earth. One after another, huge fireballs exploded around the fire ape. That ferocious force and the fierce flames all rolled towards the fire ape. Boom, boom, boom. The fire ape was clearly somewhat surprised, but there was no panic in its eyes. The fist that was smashing toward Xiaohua changed slightly. It hammered continuously, like the beating of a drum, and hit the numerous fireballs. The fireball talismans, which even swordsmen would find difficult to dodge, were actually destroyed by the fire ape as if they were playing with fire. The last fireball was even destroyed by the fire ape's palm. Haha, it's indeed the fire ape. This fire controlling technique is innate. Ordinary people can only look up to its dust. Xiaohua sighed. He boasted that he already had some understanding of the divine fire technique, but in terms of fire controlling technique, he was clearly inferior to this fire ape. He didn't have the confidence that he could easily crush the fire talismans when they exploded. Roar! The fire ape cracked open its mouth, as if it was mocking and showing off. It waved its hands and a series of fireballs were born from its hands. It threw them toward Xiaohua as if it was playing with fire. Xiaohua saw the mocking in the fire ape's eyes and his heart was also stunned. Without thinking, he waved his hand and dozens of fire talismans once again flew out. Rumble! The fire talismans exploded between Xiaohua and the fire ape. The flames soared into the sky and enveloped the surrounding area of 100 zhang. The shockwave even stirred up the dust within 100 zhang. There were even some mountain rocks that were blown away by the fireballs. The entire scene was a complete mess. Roar! This time the fire ape was completely enraged. It used all its strength to open its bloody mouth, and its teeth made a ga sound. With a loud roar, its 10 zhang tall body slightly swayed and actually flashed within the flames. It quickly rushed in front of Xiaohua, and its huge fist smashed towards Xiaohua's body with the sound of the wind fire escape. Xiaohua was even more stunned. This was the first time the fire ape used the fire escape in front of him. Even that day in the flame forest swamp, it didn't use it when it was in a dangerous situation. It seemed that the fire ape's strength had greatly improved in these past few decades. However, when Xiaohua saw the fire ape approaching him, he was not afraid at all. With a wave of his hand, he took out his enormous spiked club. With a woo sound, he welcomed the fire ape's fist head-on. Suddenly seeing the huge wolf tooth club, the fire ape was also slightly stunned. Looking at Xiaohua waving the wolf tooth club that was bigger than itself like a baby, it was really frightened. Pung! A loud sound echoed. While the fire ape was still in a daze, the wolf-tooth club hit its fist. The fire ape's fist was shaken and the magic tool wolf-tooth club also let out a ZZ sound. The fire ape lowered its head and looked at its fist in disbelief. Soon after, it raised its head and its eyes were already scarlet red. Roar, roar! The fire ape roared 3 times and waved its arms as if it was angry. The flames around its body also suddenly rushed out and attacked Xiaohua's head. Come! How could Xiaohua be afraid of it? He roared without fear and waved his wolf-tooth club. His body flew up and fought with the fire ape. A deafening roar sounded and flames splashed around the surroundings. Not to mention the rocks, even the dust was refined by the fire ape's flames and turned into pitch-black beads that rolled around. The mess on the rocks was also the remnants of the flames. Furthermore, countless large holes were left behind by the fire ape's fists or by Xiaohua's wolf-tooth club. After fighting for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, Fairy Hongxia and the rest still didn't appear. Instead, the fire ape's roars became even louder. The fire ape wasn't proficient in controlling fire, and its arms had a huge strength that could tear apart tigers and leopards. In this kind of close combat, other than in a group fight, it had never suffered such a big loss. Now that it saw a cultivator who was much shorter than it, and was actually in a deadlock with it, it had long lost its rationality. Its eyes were abnormally scarlet red, and it opened its bloody mouth that emitted a disgusting stench, as if it would only be satisfied if it ate Xiaohua alive. Peng! Xiaohua's figure was like a light wind and flew out from under the fire ape's armpit. He didn't even turn his head and casually swung his wolf-tooth club, smashing it on the fire ape's back. Although the fire ape's skin was thick and its body was protected by flames, when sparks flew, the fire ape's figure actually staggered and fell forward. However, the fire ape actually took advantage of this moment and lifted its foot, as if it wanted to stomp Xiaohua into meat paste go. Xiaohua didn't hesitate and raised the wolf-tooth club in his hand, hitting it on the fire ape's foot. Ayo! The fire ape let out a sorrowful cry, as if it was in pain. It hugged its foot and fell in midair. This fire ape is quite interesting. Xiaohua was somewhat hypocritical. However, it's too arrogant and unruly. Wu! Immediately after, the fire ape pounded its own chest and opened its mouth. A turbulent pillar of fire rushed out from its mouth and enveloped Xiaohua. Ha ha ha! You want to compete with this young master in fire techniques? Xiaohua laughed loudly. The wolf-tooth club in his hand disappeared after a pause. Immediately after, he opened his mouth and spat out a cold flame, like a fire net, to meet the fire ape's attack. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The two types of fire fused together. However, Xiaohua's cold flame only lasted for a moment before it was broken by many thin flames. It was as if thousands of small fire snakes were licking Xiaohua's left side. Ayo, this fire ape is really powerful. Xiaohua faintly smiled. With a wave of his hand, he took out the magic bottle that contained the innate true fire. This magic bottle couldn't be considered a high-grade item, and Xiaohua didn't really refine it. At this moment, he activated his magic power, and a wisp of innate true fire flickered within the magic bottle. Immediately after, a suction force was produced and the fire ape's pillar of fire was sucked into it, leaving not even a drop behind. Woo woo! A trace of astonishment flashed through the fire ape's scarlet eyes. It seemed to have seen the power of the innate true fire. However, at this moment, it was already controlled by anger. It opened its bloody mouth again, and an unconcealable confinement force was produced from its mouth. Immediately after, the fire ape spat out a fiery red nidin from its mouth. The situation of this nidin was different from the first time the fire ape appeared. When the nidin was spat out in the air, the surrounding dozens of feet was enveloped by a kind of pressure. A faint confinement force was emitted from this pressure, and traces of sparks were faintly discernible within this range of dozens of feet. Woo! A strange hissing sound was produced from the nidin. An enormous force mixed with extreme heat was emitted from the nidin at the same time, and smashed towards Xiaohua. Come at me. Xiaohua slapped his forehead and released the pressure of the gold core to contend with the might of the nidin. At the same time, he waved his hand and took out the seal of overturning the sea. However, when Xiaohua activated the seal of overturning the sea, his heart shook and the seal of overturning the sea disappeared from his hand. Xiaohua raised his hand and slapped his forehead again. Immediately, a hurricane was produced from his forehead. That hurricane was so sharp that it was like wind blades, cutting apart the confinement of the Niden within dozens of feet. Moreover, in the air, the faintly discernible wisps of fire were blown away like candles in the wind, on the verge of collapse. What's more, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth within hundreds of feet of Xiaohua condensed in the direction of Xiaohua. The huge rocks and dust that were shattered by the fight between the two were all swept up by this hurricane. The hand of a nascent soul. Chapter 2843. Previously, when Xiaohua was in the sword tomb, he had occasionally revealed his nascent soul stage hand. However, at that time it was not too mature. It could even be said that he only had a little bit of experience. During this period of time, although Xiaohua hadn't used it again, he had always been thinking about it in his heart. He had always been trying to comprehend it. With the heaven and earth sleeve as a foundation, although this nascent soul hand might not be pure, when he really used it now, it was quite decent. The hurricane mixed with the gravel and sand condensed into a huge palm. It was as if a real huge hand was grabbing towards the inner core. A restraining force that could compete with or even surpass the restraining force of the inner core was born from the hand. Although it hadn't really grasped the inner core, the previously ferocious golden core had now lost all its momentum under the giant hand. The previously spiraling golden core had become sluggish, and it didn't even move in the air. Ayo! At this moment, the fire ape's crimson eyes became somewhat clear. A trace of panic flashed through it. It really could not understand why Xiaohua, who it had met once before, was so powerful now. The fire ape roared angrily. The crimson inner core suddenly flashed with a circle of intense brilliance. Even though Xiaohua was far away, he still felt an indescribable heat. The nascent soul stage hand that was covering the inner core was immediately burned by this heat and dissipated. Powerful, Xiaohua was greatly shocked. He hurriedly flung his Taoist robe, wanting to use the heaven and earth sleeve technique to stabilize the nascent soul stage hand. At this moment, the fire ape's inner core suddenly retreated and fell into the fire ape's mouth. Moreover, the fire ape did not hesitate at all. Flames flashed under its feet, and it prepared to escape into the distance. Hee. At this time, you still want to leave? Xiaohua sneered. His figure swayed, and lightning flashed under his feet as he chased after the fire ape. Roar! The fire ape did not expect Xiaohua's flying speed to be so fast. In a moment he had already arrived behind it. It hurriedly roared, and that roar shook the surroundings, echoing in the mountains. Hearing the fire ape's cry and the fire ape's anxious expression, Xiaohua suddenly had a bad feeling. Damn it, this fire ape is so strange. The first time I saw it in Flaming Forest Swamp, it was with the Thunder Beast. It seemed like it was the one who lured the Thunder Beast here. But today it actually came all the way to the Meng Mountains. Could it be that there are still Thunder Beasts here? Just as he was thinking about it, a spiritual sense comparable to that of a nascent soul cultivator swept over, and a hoarse voice rang out from afar. No way! As that divine sense swept past Xiaohua, a scorching and ferocious feeling spread out from that divine sense, causing Xiaohua's divine sense to feel a stinging pain. What kind of spirit beast is this? How can it be so powerful? When the fire ape sensed this divine thought, it let out a loud cry of joy and flew towards the source of the sound without caring about anything else. Even if another lightning beast comes, you can forget about escaping from my hands. Xiaohua knew that this fire ape had some connection with the Misty Mountain. The powerful restriction in the Sun-Moon Corona most likely needed this fire ape, and the soul seal inside had to be unsealed for Xue. How could Xiaohua release this fire ape? While thinking, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the Sun-Moon Corona appeared in his hand. Ayo! An extremely sorrowful cry was heard. As soon as the Sun-Moon Corona appeared, it was sensed by the fire ape. The fire ape turned its head to look at the Sun-Moon Corona, which was overflowing with brilliance, and immediately let out a cry, fleeing even more desperately. Go! Xiaohua urged his magic power, and the Sun-Moon Corona within the Sun-Moon Corona rotated like a sun, and the Sun-Moon Corona rotated around the Sun-Moon Corona in the opposite direction. The Sun-Moon Corona was incomparably brilliant as it chased after the fire ape. In the blink of an eye, the sun-moon corona caught up with the fire ape. Wu, a powerful suction force was generated from the sun-moon corona, enveloping the fire ape. Withdraw, Xiaohua faintly smiled. The sun-moon corona let out a buzzing sound, and the entire magic artifact shook. The suction force was like waves, rushing towards the fire ape's head. Ayo! The fire ape raised its hand high up, covering its head. Its facial features were all distorted, and it felt extreme pain. A faintly discernible fire shadow appeared on top of the fire ape's head, gradually moving towards the sun-moon corona. See! A hoarse cry was heard, and the divine sense in the distance became even more furious. Xiaohua felt as if the air around him was about to be ignited, and a kind of dryness that he had never experienced before gradually emerged from the bottom of his heart. Xiaohua did not dare to release his divine sense, and raised his head to look. Right at the origin of the sound, a 3-zhang tall monster with a body full of red fur was flying towards him on a red cloud. This monster was very strange. It seemed to have the shape of a human, but the movements of its limbs were very stiff, and its arms and legs did not seem to be able to bend. What puzzled Xiaohua the most was that this monster's entire body was covered in red fur. The fine fur covered the monster's entire body, and not a single bit of skin was exposed. Moreover, there was a layer of fine powdery substance on top of the red fur, and it faintly emitted a phosphorescent light. This body hair was so luxuriant that it actually completely covered the monster's face, and its appearance could not be seen clearly. Only a pair of eyes could be seen through the gaps of the fur. This is a human? Or a soul beast? Xiaohua thought inwardly, but his gaze once again fell on the monster's 2 enormous breasts. Those enormous breasts were no different from an ordinary girl's breasts, but they were much bigger. Ayo! When Xiaohua saw this monster, the fire ape naturally also saw it. A heart-wrenching roar came from the fire ape's mouth, and it was asking for help. See, that monster also raised its head and roared, but its voice was not as loud as the fire ape's. However, Xiaohua could still hear that soft voice. As the monster's voice entered his ears, Xiaohua's mind slightly shook, and his vision became a little blurry. Good boy, Xiaohua was greatly alarmed, and he hurriedly used God's guidance. A strand of coolness flowed through his mind, and the thirst of his divine sense was somewhat alleviated, but his mind was still a little shaky. Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent, and he hurriedly released his soul strands to block the monster's attack. The soul strands vibrated freely, blocking the monster's attack. Looking at the fire ape again, the silhouette of the fire ape that had been sucked out earlier gradually returned to its original position, and its body that was tumbling in the air also stopped. You still want to leave at this time? Even if this young master does not take your life, I will not let you go. Xiaohua sneered and pointed his finger. A few words of incantation came out, and the brilliance of the sun-moon corona changed again. The sun-moon corona gradually shrunk, and the sun-moon corona flattened, turning into something similar to a Dao crown. Go, Xiaohua pointed his finger again, and a wave of magic power surged. With a so sound, the Dao crown landed on the fire ape's head. The fire ape was greatly alarmed, and its 2 claws grabbed the sides of the Dao crown, exerting all its strength to take it away from its head. Tight! The corner of Xiaohua's mouth rose into a slight smile. This sun-moon corona method was something that he obtained when he was refining it. At that time he did not know what use it had, but today he found out that it actually had such a miraculous use. Roar! A deafening roar came out from the fire ape's mouth. The pain on the fire ape's face was even more intense than before, and its entire body fell to the ground in midair. Its 2 claws rapidly scratched its head, and traces of blood seeped out. It was actually the fire ape's claws that had scratched it. However, that Dao crown seemed to have taken root on its head. No matter how it struggled, even if it used its head to hit the ground, that Dao crown did not move in the slightest. Boom! A light sound rang out, and a flame flashed above Xiaohua's head. It was as if the true fire within Xiaohua's body had uncontrollably erupted. Moreover, an incomparable impatience suddenly emerged from the bottom of his heart, and a kind of pressure that came from the inside out was about to explode. Xiaohua did not have time to deal with the fire ape. He raised his head to look again, and this time he was truly stunned. Right next to the monster, hundreds and thousands of soul beasts suddenly appeared. And on the backs of these soul beasts stood soul warriors. Damn it, this fire ape is really a genius. Xiaohua could not help but praise in his heart. Previously, you were together with the incomparably powerful thunder beast in Flame Forest Swamp, and now you've come all the way to Million Miles Mountain, and even become friends with this monster and soul beasts. If this young master really killed you, it would be a waste of my talent. Xiaohua did not have the confidence to deal with this monster, and he did not want to fight against a soul warrior. His body quickly descended, and with a wave of his hand, the universe in the sleeve was unleashed, and in an instant, the fire ape was imprisoned. Under the double imprisonment of the sun-moon corona and the universe in the sleeve, the fire ape only had the strength to tear apart tigers and leopards, and the ability to control true fire. Now like a dead animal, it was lifted up by Xiaohua. Xiaohua then took out a spirit pouch and threw the fire ape into it. After easily dealing with the fire ape, Xiaohua glanced at the monster that was still some distance away from him. That monster's limbs were stiff, and it flew rather slowly. Xiaohua might not be able to fight against this monster's strange ability, but it seemed that escaping from the monster and the soul warrior's eyes was not a difficult matter. However, seeing the numerous soul warriors flying over from all over the mountains and plains, Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. Oh, not good. Where are my wife and the others? Thinking of this, Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent, and released his divine sense. Who would have thought that just as Xiaohua released his divine sense, a feeling of being thrown into an oven immediately came over from his divine sense. The surroundings seemed to be filled with waves of fire, and the indescribable fire was burning. The needles forced Xiaohua to have no choice but to withdraw his divine sense. However, his Buddhist sense, which had always been useful, was also forced to withdraw by the fire. Moreover, his Buddhist sense was not as good as his divine sense, and there was actually a burning sensation. What is this monster? Xiaohua was stunned. He knew that the Million Meng Mountains were mysterious, and that it was a place that Taoist cultivators did not dare to enter. However, he still did not expect that even though they were not even in the depths of the Million Meng Mountains, and were still in the Kai family's ancestral shrine, with his strength comparable to a nascent soul cultivator, he was unable to deal with a monster that he had not even seen before. This won't do. Even if my cultivation is damaged, I still have to find my wife and the others' whereabouts. Xiaohua was very anxious. His figure rose into the sky, and he released his divine sense again. Chapter 2844. It was really like a naked man jumping into a lake of fire. Ever since Xiaohua started cultivating, he had suffered a lot. Lightning tribulation, body sculpting, bone tempering, 10,000 years of solitude, etc. However, it seemed that he could not avoid those sufferings. He was forced to face them. But this time was different. He could have retracted his divine sense. Perhaps everything would be fine. Perhaps he could have escaped this hellish suffering. However, Xiaohua did not dare to retract his divine sense. He understood that with his poor sense of direction, he would lose track of Fairy Hongxia and the others as soon as he flew up. He could only go further and further away, and he would never be able to find them. Xiaohua could only rely on his divine sense. Ordinary people would not be able to understand the feeling of falling into a lake of fire. Even if their hands touched the flames, they would be burned. How could ordinary people reach their hands into the flame again? Although it was possible to pull chestnuts out of the fire, the process was extremely short. How could it be compared to Xiaohua's torment of jumping into the fire? That deep pain would occasionally pierce his divine sense. It was as if thousands of sharp needles were constantly attacking Xiaohua. Roar! Xiaohua roared, as if he wanted to roar out the pain. He did not dare to stay in the air for long. Lightning flickered around his body as he flew towards the monster. Rumble! Xiaohua's hands danced in the air as if he had gone crazy. The dark clouds in the sky surged rapidly, gradually accumulating. Dozens of lightning bolts struck down like sharp swords. All the lightning bolts had only one target, and that was the flying monster. Hiss! The monster saw the change in the sky and stopped in mid-air. It looked at the sky with great astonishment, then looked at Xiaohua. When the lightning struck, the monster's body immediately landed on top of a hill. Strangely, the hillside was the same as the other places. Because of the changes in Meng Mountains, there was no vegetation growing on it. It looked like it was filled with rocks and dust. However, when the monster's feet stepped on the hillside, an indescribable yellow color appeared under the monster's feet and rapidly spread across the entire hillside. Cracks quickly appeared on the hard boulders, and after a lot of cracks, they turned into powder. It was as if the monster had absorbed the last bit of moisture on the hillside. Hiss! Xiaohua clearly saw this strange scene and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was immediately stunned, as if he had thought of something. Hitorigami. This is a drought demon. Xiaohua suddenly cried out in shock. Once the drought demon appears, the land will be dyed red for thousands of miles. Damn it! Could this drought demon be the cause of the abnormal changes in Meng Mountains? No, that's not right. The drought demon was born because of the change in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Rumble, Xiaohua's cry was really effective. The pain in his divine sense actually lessened a little. Xiaohua naturally didn't dare to be negligent. His body turned into a bolt of lightning and rapidly flew toward a place, wanting to get away from this drought demon. Hiss hiss, the place where the lightning fell was precisely the standing drought demon. The threads of lightning, the lightning, and the flickering lightning net all fell. However, the drought demon raised both of its hands slightly, as if it was raising fire to burn the sky. Countless lightning bolts fell on its body, causing it to fall to the ground. However, when the drought demon stood up very tenaciously, Xiaohua discovered that these heavenly lightning actually only knocked down some red hair, and didn't hurt the drought demon in the slightest. Isn't this a little too powerful? Xiaohua's eyeballs were about to fall out. Although he knew that the drought demon had a head of copper and arms of iron, and that its entire body was hard, but he didn't expect it to be this hard. Wu Hamba let out a rare cry. Xiaohua's entire body made a whoosh sound, as if it was about to explode. A splitting sensation emerged from his skull. Furthermore, that divine sense that was originally already covered in burns was actually cleaved apart by a kind of sharpness that was like a fiery sword. Motherfucker, how long has it been? My divine sense was already injured by the drought demon. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He still stubbornly released his divine sense, continuing to sweep towards the distance. At this moment, the previously distant soul beasts were also flying closer. These soul beasts' bodies had some faint green brilliance. These green brilliances intertwined with each other, covering half the sky. Xiaohua's divine sense swept across some of these green brilliances, and a cool feeling entered his body. It was very pleasant. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment before the green brilliance began to corrode Xiaohua's divine sense, burning even more fiercely than the fire. Damn it! Xiaohua cursed angrily. He didn't want to get caught up in a fight with these soul warriors. His figure slightly turned, and he flew towards the side of the soul warriors. Unexpectedly, when they saw Xiaohua fly away, those soul warriors acted as if they didn't know. They continued to chase in the direction they came from, which was the direction where the drought demon fell. Moreover, because the drought demon was now flying and chasing after Xiaohua, it even waved the soul weapon in its hand, causing a sky full of green brilliance to pounce towards the drought demon. Oh, I understand now. Xiaohua suddenly realized. These millions of Meng Mountain soul cultivators are here to kill the drought demon. They're not here to help the drought demon save the fire ape. However, soon after, Xiaohua was stunned. But how can these soul cultivators kill the drought demon? But at this moment, Xiaohua's divine sense seemed to have discovered something. His face changed greatly, and a surge of anger involuntarily rose from the bottom of his heart. His divine sense retracted in a sorry state, and the lightning around his body flickered as he flew into the distance. It was actually the imperial lightning transformation that Xiaohua rarely used. Rumble, Xiaohua wasn't the only one flying. The dark clouds and lightning that had gathered in the sky earlier were also surging with Xiaohua into the distance. It seemed like Xiaohua's anger was soaring to the heavens, and the drought demon that was chasing after Xiaohua was also chasing after him. Because the drought demon had changed direction, it ran into the soul warriors. The green brilliance that blotted out the sky and covered the earth was like a gigantic tentacle that grabbed at the drought demon. Hiss! The drought demon's eyes that were covered by its red hair revealed a look of anger. It stretched out its hand and grabbed at the air a few times. A scorching heat comparable to the hand of a nascent soul cultivator shot up into the air. Hiss! The green brilliance of the drought demon melted in an instant, as if the green brilliance was being washed away by a flood. Roar! The dozen or so soul warriors that were closest to the drought demon waved the soul weapons in their hands. The soul beasts under their feet also spat out a green brilliance, and an obscure wave of energy enveloped the drought demon. Huff! Seemingly hit by the soul warriors, the drought demon shook its head slightly and opened its mouth to roar at the soul warriors. GG woo woo! Seeing this, the soul warriors were overjoyed. They roared to each other and urged their soul beasts to gather even more soul warriors to attack. And the soul incantations in their mouths were rapidly recited, wanting to launch a fatal attack on the drought demon. Seeing so many soul warriors blocking its way, and even more so, becoming more and more difficult to deal with like flies, the drought demon lost its last bit of patience. Looking at Xiao Hua's already disappearing figure, it opened its mouth to roar again, and stretched out its hand to grab. Bang bang bang, a series of explosions rang out. Several soul warriors that were in the middle of reciting soul incantations and urging their soul beasts to attack the drought demon inexplicably exploded. All of their flesh and blood scattered down like powder. And the soul beasts they were riding also fell from the sky. GG. The remaining soul cultivators were somewhat scared. It seemed that after chasing for half a day, only now did they realize how powerful the drought demon was. Unfortunately, how could the attack of over 1,000 people be so easily stopped? The soul warriors behind these soul warriors continued to urge their soul beasts to chase after the drought demon. Soul incantations were also released. Pa 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 pa, a series of sounds rang out. It was like swatting flies. One after another, the soul warriors' flesh and blood exploded, and one after another, their soul beasts fell from the sky. Even the soul warriors who didn't notice before instinctively heard it. After all, this wasn't a fight with swordsmen. This was a one-sided massacre. These soul warriors were simply no match for the drought demon. Roar! The drought demon opened its mouth and laughed. All of the soul warriors were so scared that they urged their soul beasts to retreat. The scene was like a rising tide forcing itself to retreat. It was quite a spectacular sight. The drought demon ignored these soul warriors and continued to fly in the direction of Xiao Hua. It seemed that the fire ape was very important to it. The remaining soul warriors stood in the sky for a moment. Seeing no trace of Yi Yu and Hou Yin, they looked at each other and urged their soul beasts to chase after the drought demon again. But this time, they only dared to stay far away. Activating the green defensive brilliance, no one dared to fly half a step. Where did Yi Yu and Hou Yin go? When the two of them were killing the drought demon, they naturally commanded the soul warriors to attack. However, the drought demon didn't want to fight them and they couldn't kill it. Originally, they chased after the drought demon to see if they could find any opportunities. The direction the drought demon went was naturally where the fire ape was, and this place wasn't far from the mountain peak, where Xiao Mao put down Qieqi and the two blue witch feathers. Hundreds or even thousands of soul beasts flew past. Qieqi might not have known, but Qing Wuyu already knew. The two soul beasts didn't have any intelligence. They just flapped their wings and flew into the air, leaving Qieqi jumping and shouting on the mountain peak. Yi Yu and Hou Yin were both wise people. After seeing the power of the drought demon, they knew that this trip was a failure. However, Hou Yin couldn't just turn back. He sent his subordinates back and continued to mobilize the other soul warriors, while continuing to chase after the drought demon. Yi Yu, on the other hand, had already achieved his goal. He wasn't afraid to follow behind Hou Yin. While they were quietly discussing how to deal with the drought demon, the blue witch feathers had already flown close to them. At first, Yi Yu didn't care. The blue witch feathers were just ordinary soul beasts in the millions of Meng Mountains. Who knew where these two soul beasts came from? But 7 was different. He thought about it for a while and figured it out. He knew that Xiao Mao had saved the soul beast in the Bai and stronghold. Although he didn't know that Xiao Mao had brought 2 soul beasts with him. How could 2 soul beasts suddenly appear in such a barren place? 7 hurriedly reported this to Yi. Yi was a calculative person. Once he was reminded, he immediately understood. He was overjoyed and asked for help from Hou Yan. Chapter 28:45. Hou Yan, who was still troubled, frowned even more when he heard this. In fact, he really didn't want to get involved in the matters of Shibai stronghold, especially such a sensitive matter. Although he agreed to help because he wanted something, there was still a sense of evasiveness in his bones. He didn't believe that in such a big Ming mountains, he would really run into Xiaomao this time. However, things were often so coincidental. When they really ran into each other, Hou Yan couldn't refuse anymore. He could only send his disciples to continue chasing Hamba, while he led over 100 spirit warriors and followed Yi's 10 trusted subordinates to change direction. After all, the green witch feather was just an ordinary soul beast. How could it be as psychic as a soul beast commanded by a spirit warrior? After circling around, they slowly returned to the mountain peak, where Qiaqi was. Qiaqi obviously didn't know the origin of these people. When it saw so many spirit warriors coming, it quickly stood up and bowed. However, no matter how Yi and Hou Yan asked, Qiaqi didn't reveal Xiaomao's whereabouts. Hou Yan was helpless and didn't say much, but how could Yi let it go? He only nodded slightly, and Qi immediately walked out and cut off one of Qiaqi's arms, letting the blood flow out like a fountain. When Qiaqi saw Xiaomao before, it had already fainted from hunger. Now that it was severely injured, it couldn't stand and fell to the ground. Its blood soaked the dried mountain rocks. Seeing that Qiaqi still refused to speak, Qi summoned his flying sword and sliced off the flesh on Qiaqi's other arm piece by piece. Qiaqi, who had gritted his teeth and remained silent, couldn't help but cry out in pain. His voice was so shrill that even the 2 green witch feathers cried out in shock in midair. Qiaqi's last arm was almost cut into bones, but Qi still didn't ask why. Under Qi's torture, Qiaqi only had 1 breath left to struggle. Qi didn't dare to casually kill Qiaqi without Yi's orders. Even Hou Yan, who had never regarded the lives of the Aborigines as lives, frowned when he saw such cruel means. Ahem. Hou Yan coughed and said unhappily, "Fu Man, although this Aborigine is a lowly person, he is still a citizen of Meng Mountain. It's fine if you killed him, but to torture him in front of your little brother, isn't that inappropriate?" Night Rain was naturally angry. He didn't expect this native to be so stubborn. This native showed him the loyalty of the natives to the descendants of Shibai. Hearing Hou Yan's words, he said faintly, "Brother Hou Yan, this is the internal affair of our Shibai village. The untouchables here are my people. I am the Fu Man of the Shibai stronghold. There is no reason why I can't deal with this lowly commoner, right?" "Humph, if that's the case, Fu Man will take care of the internal affairs here." Hou Yan waved his hand, and the soul beast landed. Hou Yan pretended to leave. "Hey, Brother Yi, you didn't expect that?" Hou Yan was already regretting his decision. He hastily shouted, but before he could finish his sentence, a strong wave of energy appeared in the sky. Then a light flashed in the sky. It was as if a hurricane had blown past. 3 figures appeared from the light and flew into the distance. "Ah?" Yi was shocked at first, but when he saw them clearly, he was wild with joy. Yes, of the 3 people who appeared, Xiaomao, whom he wanted to kill the most, was among them. Xiaohua, whom he feared the most, wasn't here. Wasn't this what he wanted? "Hou Yan!" Yi shouted recklessly. "You and I have already agreed that the 3 of them have been sent here by the Huta goddess. Look carefully. That young cultivator is my enemy. You only need to kill him today, and everything I promised you before will still count." Hou Yan was also shocked. He didn't know how these 3 people appeared here. When he heard Yi's words, he was also moved. However, he was still cautious and said, "It's just a few foundation establishment cultivators. Why do you need to worry about them? How about this? I'll help you stall these 2 foundation establishment cultivators. As for that, you can deal with it yourself." "Okay, I'll do as brother says." When Yi heard this, he didn't say anything else. His soul beast roared in the air and rushed toward Xiaomao. Several of Yi's confidants also urged their soul beasts to chase after Xiaomao. Ho Yen wasn't in a hurry. He looked coldly at them and waved his hand. A soul warrior came forward and gave a few orders. The 100 soul warriors shouted a few times and waved their soul armaments. Gradually, a green light appeared and rushed towards Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia. Ho Yen reached out his hand and a snow-white bone staff appeared in his hand. The soul beast under his feet also flew up. Jie, the 2 blue shaman feathers didn't know what was going on. They flapped their wings and flew into the air to catch up with the other soul beasts. Although none of the soul beasts were blue shaman feathers, the 2 blue shaman feathers seemed to be very close to the other soul beasts. From time to time, they would soar up and play with the other soul beasts. The green light also wrapped around the blue shaman feathers. In the blink of an eye, the entire mountain was empty except for Chia Weeping. Chia Weeping struggled painfully to get up. Almost immediately, he fell to his knees and stared at the sky. He stared at the direction where the others were going, and saw Xiao Mao's tall figure. Xiao Mao and the others were just as surprised. They were originally together with Xiao Hua, so their speed was roughly the same. However, just as they were about to be teleported away, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly sped up again. He actually surpassed them by more than 30 meters, disappearing into the space ahead of them. It was truly impossible for them to catch up. However, when Xiao Mao and the others reappeared in midair, they found themselves in the millions of Meng Mountains. Sure enough, Xiao Hua was separated from them. Of course, when they realized that this was where Xiao Hua was before, they heard the cries of soul beasts behind them. With a sweep of their wills, they knew that Yi Yu was here. Truly, enemies are bound to meet. Li Zongbao sneered. With a clap of his hand, the immortal slaughtering whip appeared in his hand. Fairy Hongxia was even calmer. She opened her mouth and the phoenix token flew out and landed in her hand. Seeing the 2 of them take out their magical treasures, Xiao Mao did not dare to be negligent. With a clap of his hand, the broken golden arrow called the sun-shooting arrow was taken out from his storage bag. Yi Yu, seeing Yi Yu controlling his soul beast to fly over, Li Zongbao said coldly, "You really don't give up on your evil intentions. I should have killed you before we reached the Meng Mountains." "Ha ha ha, Li Zongbao. I know that your name is Li Zongbao. I already knew that day at Drifting Cloud Lake. I also knew it during the Battle of the Sword Catacomb." Yi Yu laughed loudly. "You, a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, want to kill me? You should take a piss and look at your own shadow. If it wasn't for the terrifying phoenix by your side that day, I would have already killed all of you. How could I have kept you alive until today?" Yi Yu set up a soul formation in the Sword Catacomb and helped the sword cultivators of Huan Country to fight against the cultivators of the 3 cultivation countries. Fairy Hongxia waved her hand, causing the 5-colored phoenix medallion to emit a 5-colored brilliance around her. Then she said coldly, "Today there are also soul cultivators fighting against swordsmen in Meng Mountains. Are you a swordsman? Or a soul cultivator?" Fairy Hongxia's voice was loud. Obviously, she wanted Ho Yen behind Yi Yu to hear her. Sure enough, when he heard Yi Yu setting up a soul formation for sword cultivators, Ho Yen frowned and controlled his soul beast to stop in midair. "Haha, sword cultivators are the enemies of my Meng Mountains. Aren't cultivators the enemies of my Meng Mountains as well?" Yi Yu was not flustered at all. He laughed loudly and said, "My ancestors were sword cultivators. I have never denied this. However, my ancestors gave their all for the sake of the sword domain. Yet, when the sword cultivators won, they did not care about my ancestors' contributions and killed all of them. If not for the fact that my ancestors were not in the sword domain and were able to escape, where would I be now? Therefore, I have long stopped seeing myself as a sword cultivator. The reason why I set up a soul formation in the sword catacomb to help LV Ruochang is because I have an agreement with her. The blood souls that activate the soul formation must be the disciples of the 4 sects who killed my ancestors. I am avenging my Yi clan. Although the swordsmen are fighting against the soul cultivators of Meng Mountains, I have always had a clear conscience and have always seen myself as a member of Meng Mountains. If you want to talk about this, you are looking down on the people of Meng Mountains." Hearing this, Ho Yen was enlightened. But then he was displeased. If Yi Yu had said this first, he might not have cared. Just like what Yi Yu said, the life and death of cultivators had nothing to do with him. Moreover, with Yi Yu's status, Hou Yan knew that Yi Yu would never do anything that would harm Meng Mountains for the sake of swordsmen. However, it was Fairy Hongxia who forced Yi Yu to say this. Yi Yu had the intention to hide this from Hou Yan, and this made Hou Yan feel uncomfortable. Hee, who knows what you are thinking? Fairy Hongxia saw Hou Yan's expression and her heart tightened. She hurriedly said, "Everyone knows that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. Quan Country might be one of your destinations, and these millions of Meng Mountains might also be one of your bargaining chips." Haha, Yi Yu was embarrassed and angry, but on the surface he laughed and waved his hand. "You little girl, who do you think you are? You're just a nameless female cultivator. If you knew my status in the village, perhaps you wouldn't say that." I naturally know that my surname is Kai and my name is Hongxia. I am the descendant of the Kai clan of Luyang. Fairy Hongxia sneered. "Even if I die, my surname is still Kai. It is still better than those who forget their surname and their ancestral origins. Betray their ancestors and forget their ancestral origins, and go to other places, right? You still call yourself Shibai Village. Shibai Village is like you." At this point, Fairy Hongxia was stunned and blurted out, "Shibai Village? You are looking for." As she spoke, Fairy Hongxia turned to look at Xiao Mao, who had also come to a realization. Chapter 2846. Well said, well said. Yi Yu was not angry at all. Instead, he clapped his hands and pointed at Xiao Mao behind Fairy Hongxia. If we're talking about people who have been forgotten by their ancestors, this Xiao Mao behind you should be the first. He has the bloodline of the great god Shibai and even cultivates Taoist techniques. He's a Taoist and he doesn't even know his name. I'm afraid he's worse than me. As he spoke, Yi Yu turned to Hou Yan and said, "Little brother, I've already tolerated them for a long time. I was just afraid that you might have some grudges in your heart. Now that you've heard everything clearly, I haven't hidden anything from you. Yes, we'll do as you said." Hou Yan pointed out Yi Yu's identity. "I'll kill these 2 Taoist cultivators." "Okay," Yi Yu nodded. Opening her mouth, the small sword was about to fly out, but Yi Yu hesitated for a moment. Clapping her hands together, the beast-like soul armament came out again. Muttering an incantation, the soul armament began to glow with a dark green light. Agree. Xiao Mao and the others had a general understanding of the situation in the shaman village. When they heard Hou Yan's words, their expressions changed slightly. They understood Yi Yu's intention. Xiao Mao's eyes narrowed and anger appeared in his eyes. Needless to say, Yi Yu must have something to do with the death of Xiao Mao's parents. Otherwise, he would not have intercepted Xiao Mao and prevented him from going to Shibai Village. When did swordsmen learn to be so cunning? You actually took over a magpie's nest in Meng Mountain. Li Zongbao waved his hand, and the immortal slaying whip emitted a yellow light. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth suddenly gathered. He said coldly, "I hate such evil deeds the most. Eat my whip." "Li Zongbao? I heard you're a famous junior cultivator in Ming Country. You're known as the #1 cultivator below the Golden Core stage." Hou Yan stomped his foot and the spirit beast flew over and blocked Li Zongbao's path. He said calmly, "I'm Hou Yan, a citizen of Meng Mountain's Huta village. I'm here to test you and see the power of the #1 cultivator below the Golden Core stage." Huta village? Seeing hundreds of soul beasts gradually encircling them, making it hard for them to escape, Fairy Hongxia hurriedly said, "Huta Stronghold has always been on good terms with Shibai Stronghold, and the descendants of Shibai Stronghold have not appeared in Meng Mountains for many years. Now that Xiao Mao is the descendant of great god Shibai, you people of Huta Stronghold should naturally be able to distinguish between the truth and the lies. This is the ancestral land of great god Shibai. Why are you protecting others? If Elder Wu and Ji-Man find out about this, Hou Yan, do you think you can escape punishment?" Ha. A mere foundation establishment cultivator. What qualifications do you have to discuss the internal affairs of Meng Mountains? Hou Yan naturally knew what Fairy Hongxia was trying to do. He laughed. "The 2 of you are my targets. If you obediently surrender or withdraw now, I can guarantee that I will not take your lives. Bah." Li Zongbao lightly spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm. Evil creature, no matter how dignified your words are, it cannot hide the evil in your heart. I believe that you also need the help of this bullshit Fu man in Huta stronghold. Or else you would not do such a thing that has been forgotten by your ancestors. That's right. Xiao Mao flew out from behind Fairy Hongxia, pointing his finger at Xia weeping on a distant hillside, and said with grief and indignation, "To use such cruel means to deal with the people under your command, you people do not deserve to be the people of Meng Mountains." Immediately after, Xiao Mao mumbled a dozen words in the native language of Meng Mountains. When he spoke, even though Hou Yan and the others were prepared, their expressions still changed. Even the hundreds of soul warriors flying in the air showed hesitation on their faces. Brother Hou Yan Yiyu naturally did not allow Xiao Mao to say anything more. He waved his hand, signaling a few of his trusted subordinates to attack. At the same time he said to Hou Yan, "If not now then when?" "Good." Hou Yan stretched out the bone staff in his hand and ordered loudly, "My sons, these 2 Dao sect cultivators have broken into Meng Mountains. You all are under the orders of Huta Great God to destroy the enemy. Kill them." When the soul warriors heard that they did not attack Xiao Mao directly, they were all overjoyed. They all roared and urged their soul beasts. The dark green brilliance was like 2 huge fingers, pointing at Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia. Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia naturally did not dare to fly. The 2 of them looked at each other, nodded slightly, and urged their transcendence energy. Li Zongbao waved his immortal slaughtering whip, and a lifelike shadow of the whip streaked across the sky, meeting the dark green brilliance head-on. In the blink of an eye, the shadow of the whip fell into the dark green brilliance. At the moment of contact, the shadow of the whip suddenly scattered, turning into hundreds of thumb-sized whip shadows. Puff 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 puff. The immortal slaughtering whip destroyed more than half of the green brilliance that was pointing at Li Zongbao. There were even a few small green brilliants that rushed into the green brilliance and hit the soul warriors in front of them. The soul warriors were shocked. They waved the soul weapons in their hands, and the soul beasts under their feet also opened their mouths, emitting a green brilliance in an attempt to block the whip shadows. Pow pow pow, several more sounds were heard. The 4 or 5 whip shadows destroyed the green brilliance, and the whip shadows disappeared. But there were still 2 whip shadows that landed on the soul warriors. Following the screams of the 2 soul warriors, the skin of the soul warriors were torn open, and their flesh was badly mangled. They fell from the soul beasts, and the soul beasts also fell with the soul warriors. Hiss, seeing this, Hou Yan couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, his face showing astonishment. It wasn't that he hadn't seen a Foundation establishment cultivator of the Dao sect, and it wasn't that he hadn't fought with the Huan Kingdom's illusory sword. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of Li Zongbao's strength, but he didn't expect Li Zongbao to be so powerful that he could even kill a soul warrior that ordinary cultivators couldn't get close to. Looking at Fairy Hongxia, it was even more beyond his expectations. The 5-colored phoenix token in Fairy Hongxia's hands looked very beautiful. She gently waved it, and a 5-colored light suddenly appeared, piercing into the dark green brilliance. In an instant, the brilliance was swept away. Although the multicolored light couldn't kill a soul warrior, it was enough to scare the soul beasts under the soul warriors into retreating several meters. This is troublesome. No wonder you came to ask for help. Hou Yan thought to himself. After a slight hesitation, he waved his bone staff, and a faint green light appeared on his face. His mouth also muttered an incantation, and as Hou Yan chanted the witchcraft incantation, a faint layer of black gas appeared near him. At the same time, the soul warriors that Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia had repelled also raised their soul weapons. Their mouths also muttered the witchcraft incantation, and strands of black gas gradually appeared in the green light that connected them. Not good, seeing such a strange situation. Fairy Hongxia's heart was alarmed, and she hurriedly shouted, "Senior brother, junior brother Xiao, let's run." "Hee hee, you've already come here, still want to leave?" At this time, Yiyu pointed his finger, and the drop of blood on the tip of his finger had already disappeared into the single eye of the palace-guarding beast. The palace-guarding beast's entire body glowed with a green light, and its body gradually expanded. "Go!" Yiyu did not even finish his sentence, and immediately jumped up from the body of the palace-guarding beast, and landed on the back of the palace-guarding beast. He slapped his hand on the palace-guarding beast's forehead, and a green brilliance like the Milky Way poured down towards the three of them. Humph, Li Zongbao sneered, and the immortal slaughtering whip in his hand waved again. The golden brilliance of the immortal slaughtering whip was indeed powerful, and even Yi Yu's soul technique could not block it. With just one whip, the green brilliance was dispersed. However, when the green brilliance flashed, Xiaomao disappeared from Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia's side. A strong sword qi in the green brilliance forced Xiaomao to move more than 10 feet away from the two of them. Junior brother Xiao, don't be hasty. Fairy Hongxia dispelled the green brilliance and shouted, and was about to fly to Xiaomao's side, when she heard a gloomy wind blowing in all directions, followed by countless GGGAGA sounds, like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves, that came from the left and right of them. Ah! Fairy Hongxia turned back to look, and saw that the area within 100 feet had been covered by a faint black aura. Within that black aura, countless ghost heads of various sizes were faintly discernible, baring their fangs. Those chilling sounds were all coming from these ghost heads. Fairy Hongxia could not help but exclaim. Compared to female cultivators who were naturally frightened, Li Zongbao was considered to be better. However, looking at the ghost heads that were as small as fists and as big as rolling balls, and the bloody remains on top of them, an inexplicable chill rose from the bottom of his heart. Furthermore, these ghost heads seemed to have spiritual intelligence. Each of them opened their black mouths, and bit into the green brilliance around them, as if they were swallowing it. And the sounds of crunching could be heard continuously. Not good. Suddenly, a chill rose from his side, and Li Zongbao did not hesitate to fling the immortal slaughtering whip in his hand. Pa! With a soft sound, the shadow of the whip lashed out, and a faint human figure appeared under the shadow of the whip. And this human figure flickered a few times before disappearing again. Hiss! Li Zongbao suddenly realized that other than the ghost heads that he could see, there were ghosts in the air that could not be seen with the naked eye. Junior brother and sister, be careful! Li Zongbao hurriedly shouted. Those ghost heads are just to attract attention. The formless ghosts are the real killers. Fairy Hongxia was really afraid of these ghosts, and hurriedly waved the phoenix token in her hand, and a 5-colored brilliance suddenly appeared. Countless screams came from around her, and one by one, the human-shaped ghosts turned into green smoke under the 5-colored brilliance and disappeared. This although Ho Yen had been chanting witchcraft incantations, and the black aura on the bone staff was getting thicker, he did not manage to control the ghosts. Instead, his face was getting darker and darker. However, when he saw the power of Fairy Hongxia's phoenix token, he could not help but be stunned. He did not even bother to chant any witchcraft incantations, and only stared at Fairy Hongxia's phoenix token with a strange expression in his eyes. It seems Ho Yen seemed to have thought of something, but he could not be sure. Or perhaps he had only heard it by chance, and could not remember it clearly. This expression only lasted for a moment, and was immediately replaced by greed. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, and he waved his bone staff, and hundreds of Hutu stronghold spirit warriors moved. Chapter 2847. Woo woo. Hundreds and thousands of ghost heads rushed out from the green light. Under each ghost head, there was a surge of black gas. They charged towards Li Zongbao and Red Dawn Fairy ferociously. Fight! Li Zongbao did not have any other tricks up his sleeve. He knew that all spells would be ineffective. He could only activate the celestial slaying whip to defend himself. Piak piak piak, one by one. The ghost heads were destroyed by the golden light of the celestial slaying whip, and turned into streaks of black gas. This black gas then gathered with the black gas of the other ghost heads, and surrounded Li Zongbao. Although Li Zongbao was brave, there were too many ghost heads. Inadvertently, a ghost head bypassed the celestial slaying whip, and rushed towards Li Zongbao's legs. It easily bit on Li Zongbao's protective light. Caw-caw sounds came from the ghost head's mouth. After a few bites, Li Zongbao's protective light started to flicker. Li Zongbao hurriedly waved the celestial slaying whip, and easily destroyed the ghost head. However, he was still a little nervous. He was not a golden core cultivator, and could not have a protective golden light like Xiao Hua. This protective golden light was naturally a defensive yellow talisman. Of course, as an outstanding disciple of the Utopia faction, Li Zongbao also had a defensive magic item on him. However, he did not think that this protective magic item would be able to stop the ghost heads from swallowing him. Moreover, the celestial slaying whip was still an unformed spiritual weapon. Xiao Hua had already said that it had to be nurtured properly until the weapon's spirit matured. Only then would it be of great use. However, since entering the Huan Kingdom, Li Zongbao had used the celestial slaying whip more than once. It was like a fetus in its mother's arms being disturbed time and time again. How could it be born in 10 months? At this moment, after using the celestial slaying whip a few times, a gust of counterforce was generated from the celestial slaying whip. It rushed straight into his meridians and blood vessels. This counterforce was different from the one from the celestial slaying whip. During the Battle of the Sword Catacomb, Li Zongbao's cultivation level and magic power were not enough to fully control the celestial slaying whip. The counterforce was mainly damaging Li Zongbao's meridians and dantian. At this moment, the damage caused by this shapeless spirit artifact was more towards one's bloodline and mind. An indescribable sense of irritation and bloodiness gradually arose in Li Zongbao's heart. Looking at Fairy Hongxia, she seemed to have lost her usual calmness. Although the phoenix token in her hand was waved from time to time, there was no pattern to it. It was as though she was dancing purely out of fear. They couldn't form a regular attack. Therefore, even though this five-colored light was very powerful and could block the ghostly heads and formless ghostly spirits better than the immortal slaughtering whip, the ghostly heads outside the light were gradually killed. However, even more ghostly heads and ghostly spirits were still pouncing on the light and devouring it. Furthermore, looking at how Fairy Hongxia's arm was moving slower and slower, it was obvious that her magical power was running out. Whiz! A long and thin cry rang out from about 100 feet away from Fairy Hongxia. The palace-guarding beast under Yi Yu raised its slender neck, and its body glowed with a green light. The green light then gathered in front of the palace-guarding beast's chest. Following that, the palace-guarding beast spat out a half-chi-long green soul sword from its mouth and flew towards Xiao Mao, who was holding the shooting sun arrows in his hands. Go! Xiao Mao had been channeling his magical power all this while. Although he had not fully accumulated his power, the soul sword was already flying towards him. He did not dare to be careless. A golden light shot out, and the shooting sun arrow flew towards the green soul sword. Woo! The shooting sun arrow disappeared in a flash and reappeared in front of the soul sword. The tip of the arrow seemed to have boundless strength, as though it could split the air in half. But what was extremely strange was that the soul sword at the tip of the arrow did not seem to be there at all. It passed through the shooting sun arrow, and continued flying towards Xiao Mao. Furthermore, after passing through the shooting sun arrow, the speed of the soul sword suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, it was less than 5 zhang away from Xiao Mao's forehead. Oh no! Xiao Mao saw that the shooting sun arrow that he had been accumulating power for a long time had missed its target. His heart turned pale with fright. An inescapable sense of control emerged from the soul sword, and covered his forehead. A feeling of being unable to escape arose spontaneously. Damn it, this Ming Mountain spirit art is too strange. Xiao Mao smiled bitterly. He knew that he could no longer escape. Therefore he decided not to evade. He channeled the shooting sun arrow and flew towards Yi Yu without hesitation. He wanted to perish together with her Jie. The sound of a beast's cry could be heard. Suddenly, a huge green shadow descended from the sky and blocked in front of Xiao Mao. It was the huge green witch feather. Yes, the green witch feather was not sentient. It had been playing with many spirit beasts. But when it saw that Xiao Mao was in danger, how could the green witch feather not give up its life? However, this soul sword was not an ordinary flying sword. Although the green witch feather's body was huge, the soul sword flew past the green witch feather and easily shattered its soul. The green witch feather only stopped flapping its wings for a moment, and fell straight down from the sky. And it was obvious that the green witch feather's soul was too weak. After the soul sword was destroyed, it did not dim much. It only paused for a moment before thrusting towards Xiao Mao again. In the blink of an eye, It was less than half a foot away from Xiao Mao's forehead. Just as the soul sword struck down the blue sorcerer feather, the shooting sun arrow arrived in front of Yi Yu. Yi Yu was shocked when he saw the shooting sun arrow emitting a powerful ripple of mana and an indescribable, terrifying aura of death. He quickly opened his mouth and threw out his dagger. With a crack, the dagger and the shooting sun arrow were both deflected. Xiao Mao's shooting sun arrow, a Foundation establishment cultivator, was actually on par with Yi Yu's dagger, a mirage sword cultivator. But even though the shooting sun arrow was deflected, it did not slow down. Several spirit beasts next to Yi Yu were unable to dodge in time, and were all pierced by the shooting sun arrow. They did not even have time to scream before they fell from the sky. The spirit warriors were also heavily injured. Damn it! Yi Yu's heart ached. These soul warriors' cultivation levels were about the same as those at the early stage of the Foundation establishment, and the peak of the aura refining stage, but they were loyal. It wasn't easy for him to train a few of them in the Shibai village. Kill! Yi Yu roared in his mind. The spirit beast under his feet swung its tail, and the soul sword pierced Xiao Mao's forehead. Gop! The other green witch feather cried out. It was a bit confused as it watched its mother fall from the sky. Then it looked at Xiao Mao, then at the corpse of the older green witch feather, and quickly fell down. With a boom, the corpse of the green witch feather fell to the ground. There was a large cloud of dust, but in the battle no one saw it. Little green witch feather fell down and let out a few gaga sounds. Using its beak, it saw that its mother was ignoring it. It was a bit helpless. Then it turned its head to look at Xiao Mao. Then it flew to a distant mountain peak. There, Qieqi was kneeling in a pool of blood and looking at Xiao Mao with great sincerity. Qieqi's mouth was still muttering, but no one knew if he was praying or doing something else. Those trembling legs, those arms that had already turned into white bones. He didn't know what kind of power was supporting him bitterly. Qieqi's eyes were fixed on the soul sword piercing Xiao Mao's forehead. His heart was already in a knot. Needless to say, Xiao Mao's life was what Qieqi was most concerned about. It had long surpassed his own life. The soul sword was like a bolt of green lightning that instantly pierced Xiao Mao's forehead. The moment the soul sword entered his body, a trace of sorrow flashed through Xiao Mao's eyes. The desire to control life and death had never been so strong. The desire to control power had never been so strong. Perhaps only in the face of death, in the face of complete despair, could one's most primitive desire be aroused. Facing Xiao Mao, a smile appeared on Yi Yu's face. Cultivators had no special ability to resist the soul sword, unless they were golden core or nascent soul cultivators, or their own heavenly talisman patterns could block it. As for Foundation establishment cultivators, only death awaited them, who knew that when the soul sword entered Xiao Mao's forehead, a cluster of green light bloomed from the spot where the soul sword entered. It was like a blooming morning glory. On the petals of the soul sword, many small green seal runes swam out. The change in Xiao Mao's forehead stunned Yi Yu. The soul sword that had just disappeared flew out from the green seal runes and attacked the palace guarding beast under Yi Yu's feet. Moreover, the soul sword's trajectory was exactly the same as before, but its speed was several times faster. Before Yi Yu could react, the soul sword rushed into the palace guarding beast's mouth. Ayo! The palace guarding beast cried out in pain. Its entire body rapidly shrank and green light flashed. Yi Yu's face was abnormally pale. Not only was he shocked, but he was also heavily injured because of the soul sword. At this time he couldn't care about anything else. He activated the soul sword under his feet and stood in the air. As soon as Yi Yu came to a stop, the palace guarding beast transformed back into a soul armament. Cracks began to appear all over the surface of the soul armament. And when the wind blew by, the soul armament was reduced to dust. SSSS. Yi Yu tried his best to suppress the pain in his head. He sucked in a breath of cold air, and rejoiced at how lucky he was. For the sake of face, he used a soul armament to kill Xiao Mao in front of Ho Yan and the other soul warriors. If he had used his own soul technique to kill Xiao Mao, then it wouldn't have been the palace guarding beast's soul armament that would have been reduced to dust. It would have been Yi Yu himself. Third Uncle Yi Yu came to a sudden realization. It must have been because of Xiao Mao's strange phenomenon that his third uncle couldn't kill Xiao Mao. Oh? Yi Yu wasn't the only one who was surprised by this. Even Xiao Mao himself didn't know what was going on. An indescribable feeling of soreness came from his glabella. After the soul sword was repelled, the soul sword slowly returned to Xiao Mao's glabella and disappeared as if it was never there in the first place. Whoosh! There was a flash of golden light as the shooting sun arrow landed in front of Xiao Mao again after killing several soul cultivators. Ha ha ha! Yi Yu's eyes lit up when he saw the shooting sun arrow. You really are the descendant of God Shibai. Normal soul techniques can't hurt you. But even without a soul technique, I can still kill you. Chapter 28:48. As he spoke, Yi Yu's sword flashed and a dragon-shaped sword appeared from his body. Gusts of wind blew and countless amounts of heaven and earth spiritual qi rushed towards Yi Yu's dragon-shaped sword. Roar! As the orange-yellow sword light soared into the sky from Yi Yu's body, an extremely complete dragon-shaped sword intent flashed within the sword light. An enormous and indescribable aura spread out from the dragon-shaped sword, enveloping an area of several dozen meters around it. The dragon-shaped sword was extremely ferocious and was very similar to Yi Yu's arrogant face. The entire dragon-shaped sword circled in the air and flew towards Xiao Mao. Under the dragon-shaped sword Xiao Mao's entire body was covered by the aura. The aura was like a tidal wave that completely drowned him. There was no room for him to breathe. Go! Xiao Mao knew that this was a critical moment. The dragonization manual in his meridians was activated, and his true yuan rushed into the shooting sun arrow like a flood. Instantly, the tip of the shooting sun arrow emitted a strong golden light. The entire arrow flew into the air and destroyed the sword will. It then shot towards the head of the dragon-shaped sword will. When Xiao Mao sent Night Rain's soul sword back, Ho Yan's bone staff also slowly drew a line in the air. The appearance of the green seal text really gave Ho Yan a fright. However, when he saw the green seal text disappear, Ho Yan's eyes flashed with a pensive light. The bone staff in his hand just happened to draw an oval in the air. As Ho Yan lifted the bone staff, it was as if he was opening a lid. A thick black gas flew out from the oval. Ayo! A mournful ghostly cry came from the black gas, causing Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia, who were surrounded by the ghostly heads, to tremble in fear. Wu! A thick black shadow rushed out from the black smoke. A ghost head that was several times larger than all the previous ghost heads opened its pitch-black mouth and revealed itself. Hiss hiss. The ghost head spun a few rounds in the air and laughed loudly. Ho Yan's face was a little pale, but he still chanted an incantation and pointed the bone staff in his hand. A green light fell on the ghost head, and the ghost head suddenly trembled, as if it was extremely afraid of Ho Yan. It flew towards the direction the bone staff was pointing at. The targets of the ghost heads were naturally Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia. When the ghost heads charged into the group of ghost heads, they were not in a hurry to attack Fairy Hongxia's five-colored light. Instead, they opened their mouths wide and swallowed a dozen ghost heads nearby with crunching sounds. In an instant, the ghost heads were scared out of their wits. Evil creature! Ho Yan cursed and pointed the bone staff in his hand again. The ghost head quickly flew up and rushed towards Li Zongbao, who was not protected by the five-colored light. You're courting death. Li Zongbao's red flashed across his face again. Bang! The ghost head's head was head. However, the two ghost heads laughed at the same time and turned back into two complete ghost heads. They then bit at Li Zongbao from two different directions. Attack! Li Zongbao waved his hand again and destroyed the two ghost heads at the same time. Although part of the ghost heads were destroyed by the immortal slaying whip, the remaining part formed another 4 ghost heads and charged at Li Zongbao again. Sigh. What a pity about this spiritual artifact. Seeing that the immortal slaughtering whip could not kill the ghost heads, Li Zongbao sighed. He knew that a spiritual artifact would not be this powerful. It was just that his magic power was not enough, and the spiritual artifact was not completed yet. However, he also knew that if he could not escape this calamity today, this spiritual artifact would not be completed in this lifetime. Where did Xiaohua go? Instantly, Li Zongbao thought of Xiaohua again. He can ignore my life, but does he dare to ignore Fairy Hongxia's life? Li Zongbao was in danger, and Xiao Mao was even worse. The shooting sun arrow was the dragon-shaped sword will that hit Night Rain. Although the golden light on the shooting sun arrow was destroyed by the dragon-shaped head, the dragon body was not damaged and still pierced toward Xiao Mao. Before the dragon-shaped sword will could get close, another green witch feather cried out from midair. The smaller green witch feather also flew down. Different from the older green witch feather, there was a person sitting on the smaller green witch feather. It was the dying Chiu weeping. Pung, with a muffled sound, the dragon-shaped sword will hit the green witch feather. There was no suspense at all. Although the green witch feather's body was big, the sword will that formed the dragon-shaped sword will cut the green witch feather into pieces, and even cut through the corpse. As for Chiu weeping, the sword will cut through his body and he ended up like the green witch feather. The poor native Chiu weeping. Although he was saved by Xiao Mao from the mouth of another native, he still could not escape the fate of being killed by Ming Mountain's soul warriors. This devout native, until his death, his eyes were still filled with determination and conviction as he stared at Xiao Mao. He could not bear to look away for even a moment. The deaths of the green witch feather and Chiu weeping were not without effect. At least the dragon-shaped sword will was blocked. However, just as the dragon-shaped sword intent faded, a sharp sword beam rushed out from the dragon's body. It was none other than Night Rain's intrinsic sword. It had been hidden under the sword intent in an attempt to sneak an attack on Xiao Mao. The origin sword had just flown out, and the corpses of the green witch feather and Chiu weeping had not yet landed when a faint, scarred divine will swept over from afar. This divine will was so weak that it was like an old man in his twilight years. It was weak, but from this divine will, there was a tenacity and persistence. However, when the divine will swept over the corpses of the green witch feather and Chiu weeping, this divine will was ignited in an instant. A feeling of extreme anger came from this divine will. At the same time, in the distant sky, there was a faint rumbling of thunder. Hurry, the terrifying phoenix is coming. Night Rain felt the divine will and immediately urged. This guy is almost as strong as a nascent soul cultivator. He's really strong. Oh, nascent soul cultivator? Ho Yen was stunned and quickly asked. Fu Man didn't seem to have mentioned it before? Heh. As you controlled her life-bound dagger to attack Xiao Mao, she replied. He's almost as strong as a nascent soul cultivator, but he's still not a nascent soul cultivator. Do you really think he'll be able to escape the combined might of us soul warriors? Humph, what's the point of mentioning it now? Ho Yen was too lazy to argue with Night Rain. He waved the bone staff in his hand again, and the 8 ghost heads that had been destroyed by Li Zongbao roared and rushed towards Li Zongbao. Go! Xiao Mao saw the origin sword flying in front of him. He tried his best to dodge while making hand seals to control the sunshot arrow to attack Night Rain. It was a completely suicidal attack. Night Rain explained to Ho Yen while dodging the sunshot arrow. In a hurry, she didn't have the strength to kill Xiao Mao in an instant. Roar! The 8 ghost heads entangled Li Zongbao's slaughtering immortal whip. The other ghost heads found a gap and rushed in front of Li Zongbao. They opened their mouths to bite at Li Zongbao's protective magic treasure. The brilliance around Li Zongbao's body was extremely bright. It seemed that he was about to fall into a dangerous situation. Rumble! The sound of thunder streaked across the sky. It was even faster than the white horse galloping across the crevice. However, when the heavenly thunder was about 10 miles away, 2 streaks of green and red sword light shot towards Night Rain like shooting stars. Flying swords. At this time, Night Rain's dragon-shaped sword intent was already activated. The orange-yellow brilliance illuminated the sky as it roared and pierced towards Xiao Mao. Seeing the 2 flying swords flying towards him, he couldn't help but sneer. It was a kind of contempt coming from the corner of his mouth. Yes, what was the difference between using flying swords in front of a sword cultivator and displaying one's slight skill in front of an expert? Especially when the 2 flying swords were about 10 feet away from Night Rain. The green and red sword rays suddenly bloomed. The 2 sword rays, one on the left and one on the right, actually formed a heart shape in the air. The heart shape became increasingly elongated, and actually turned into the shape of a sword. Night Rain laughed even more. He had never seen a sword intent that was shaped like a sword before. However, the heart sword was filled with anger and hatred. An indescribable fear emerged from the bottom of his heart. Yes, this was the killing intent in Xiaohua's heart towards Night Rain. It was born when he saw Qi being killed by Night Rain. Although Xiaohua risked his spirit sense to search for Fairy Hongxia and the rest, if he saw Fairy Hongxia injured by Night Rain, the killing intent in his heart might not be so deep. Even if he saw Xiaomao being injured by Night Rain, he wouldn't be so angry, because this kind of injury was caused by a battle of life and death. It was an injury caused by an enemy of the same level. Xiaohua might not have any other thoughts. However, what he saw was Qi, a native, who was practically unarmed and defenseless against Night Rain. Yet he was brutally killed by Night Rain. This native didn't have any special feelings for Xiaohua. However, when this native fainted from hunger, he was almost eaten by his companions. When this native was saved by Xiaomao, he didn't mention anything about being eaten by his companions. Xiaohua didn't think that this native didn't know the situation at that time. Furthermore, when he was welcoming Xiaomao to Baiyan's stronghold, he was incomparably sincere, almost treating Xiaomao as his own sky. Xiaohua didn't know the situation of Qi's family, nor did he know if he had any children. However, when Xiaomao asked Qi to lead the way, the gratitude in Qi's eyes was enough to move Xiaohua. Looking at Qi's shattered corpse and that white bone right arm, how could Xiaohua not know that this native had been interrogated by Night Rain? Of course, Xiaohua didn't know how this native answered. However, if this native was forced to reveal Xiaomao's whereabouts, would he have suffered such heavy injuries? Besides, how could Qi know the whereabouts of Xiaomao and the rest? Although Xiaohua only saw the scene after Qi's death, he saw a lot. He saw Qing Shi Wuyu's loyalty, saw Qi's sincerity, saw their determination to die for Xiaomao. Although this native was a native, his heart was more honest and noble than a spirit warrior. If Xiaohua didn't kill Night Rain, he wouldn't be able to face this native. Therefore, Night Rain must die. Xiaohua must kill Night Rain. The anger of the heart sword was the anger in Xiaohua's heart. Chapter 2849. Yi didn't know the origin of Xiaohua's anger, nor did he care about the newly born heart sword. However, as soon as the heart sword was born, a sharp sword Qi rushed out from the heart sword. A nearly invincible sword Qi rushed out from the heart sword, not at all inferior to his own soaring dragon sword intent. The ridicule on Yiyu's face froze. Whoosh! As soon as the heart sword was born, it met the incoming soaring dragon sword intent head-on. The two sword intents collided, and a wave of Qi soared to the sky. After a loud bang, the orange sword Qi and the green and red sword Qi scattered like tiny snakes. Yiyu's body couldn't be controlled under the power of the sword Qi, and involuntarily flew back. A dark red color appeared on his face, and his eyes were filled with indescribable astonishment. Transform. Transform into a sword. Yes, the sword Qi of the heart sword defeated Yiyu's disdain. This sword intent was something he was familiar with and desired. How is this possible? Yiyu whispered, and hurriedly urged the somewhat chaotic sword Qi in his body. This Xiaohua is still several li away. He is a Dao sect cultivator. At this moment, a sharp pain came from his Naiwan palace, as if a sharp awl had pierced deep into his body. Hiss! Yiyu just sensed it, and at the same time, he hurriedly urged a secret technique to block Xiaohua's soul stab. Not waiting for him to counterattack. Rumble! Countless lightning bolts flew close to the sky and fell down. Each lightning bolt was like a sharp sword, and it struck the hundreds and thousands of ghost heads. Those ghost heads turned into green smoke under the heavenly lightning, and slowly disappeared. Aoo! The ghost head that attacked Li Zongbao heard the thunder, and although it wasn't hit by the heavenly lightning, it still slightly trembled. Obviously, it was extremely afraid of the thunder. Seeing this, Ho Yen frowned and shouted a few times. He waved his bone staff, and a burst of black qi rushed into the ghost head. The ghost head seemed to have eaten a spirit herb, and suddenly swelled up. With a crunch, it bit on Li Zongbao's defensive brilliance, and the brilliance was instantly annihilated by more than half. Under Ho Yan's command, the soul cultivators that surrounded Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia immediately split into 80%, and flew towards Xiaohua on their respective soul beasts. However, they didn't dare to use the ghost heads, and instead sent out beams of green light, to block Xiaohua's soul formation technique, and to block Xiaohua. Senior brother, don't panic. Fairy Hongxia was already somewhat weak, but she still managed to wave the Phoenix command to protect Li Zongbao. Don't worry about me, Li Zongbao said coldly. Protect Xiao Mao first. While speaking, Li Zongbao waved his slaughtering immortal whip and destroyed a ghost head. Okay, Fairy Hongxia knew that Li Zongbao was in a critical situation, but he wasn't Night Rain's target. Xiao Mao was not only someone Night Rain wanted to kill, but also the descendant of Meng Mountain Shibai. He was the hope of the people of Shibai village, and his safety couldn't be lost. But when Fairy Hongxia waved the Phoenix command, the green and red heart swords flew in front of Xiao Mao. The 3-foot-long heart swords were like a white jade pillar that supported the heavens and firmly protected Xiao Mao. Darling Xiao is here. Fairy Hongxia's heart relaxed for no reason, and she looked into the distance. Xiao Hua's figure was already in sight. Facing the dozens of soul warriors and soul beasts, he didn't hesitate to take out the soul-absorbing bell. The toad, under the control of the soul strands, struck the soul-absorbing bell. With a loud clang, the dozens of soul warriors swayed slightly, and the green light that filled the sky suddenly flashed. But only for a moment. The green light seemed to go crazy. It rushed into the soul-absorbing bell, and with a ka-cha-cha sound, the soul-absorbing bell cracked open. Then the toad began to tremble rapidly, like sand being blown away by the wind. The toad turned into fine dust and fell to the ground. It was just like Night Rain's guardian beast was defeated. What's more, the strands of soul strands that Xiaohua used to control the soul strands were suddenly hit by a strong force. All of the strands of soul strands couldn't help but dance with the strong force, and this dance was transmitted to the mysterious dark clouds. Damn it, the soul armaments I picked up are trash. Startled, Xiaohua hurriedly pulled out his strands of soul strands and tried to absorb them into the dark clouds. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In just a moment, the dark clouds in Xiaohua's mind seemed to have been hit by a heavy punch. It shook for a moment, and in front of Xiaohua, the entire world was shaking. Trying to be clever, but making a fool of myself. Xiaohua resisted the nausea and discomfort with great difficulty. Without the slightest hesitation, he made a grabbing motion with his hand. Several more bolts of heavenly lightning fell, striking the several dozen spirit warriors. Threads of lightning flickered within the green light, slowly melting the green light. Roar! The dozens of soul warriors struggled to use their solar rays to block the lightning. Roaring in unison, they waved their soul armaments, and at the same time, their soul beasts attacked in order to stop Xiaohua. Humph! Xiaohua snorted coldly. After looking at the dozens of soul warriors, he saw Night Rain controlling her flying sword. Furthermore, Night Rain himself flew out. While Xiaohua was controlling his sword intent from afar, the sword energy around his body was also surging. Clang! The sound of a sword shook the heavens. Xiaohua's figure slowly transformed into a sword and suddenly swung it in the air. Kacha! A crisp sound came from the collision between the sword and the solar rays of the soul warriors. The green light of the solar rays was cut in half by Xiaohua's sword. Good! Seeing the solar rays broken, Xiaohua was overjoyed. Swordsmen really are the nemesis of soul warriors. Immediately after, Xiaohua's figure gradually returned to normal. The sword light retracted, and like a cool breeze, he flashed past the dozens of frightened soul warriors and flew to the sky behind Night Rain. Woo! Now Night Rain had already activated the dragon-shaped sword intent to attack Xiaohua's sword. Then, with a wave of his hand, a cluster of sword light came out and chopped straight at Xiao Mao, who was about to activate the shooting sun arrows. Night Rain, you will pay with your life for Qieqi. Xiaohua sneered. With a clap of his hand, he took out the yin-yang sword gourd. The executioner's elemental light rushed out, and the green and red elemental light came straight down, twisting towards Night Rain's neck. The executioner's elemental light was Xiaohua's sharpest move. Even something as strong as the executioner's elemental light would be defeated, let alone Night Rain. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and prepared to look at Hou Yan, who was controlling the ghost head to deal with Li Zongbao. However, just as the green and red sword lights were about to land, a flat disc that was several feet in size suddenly flew out from Night Rain's hand. This disc seemed to be made of metal, but it wasn't. It seemed to be made of wood, but it wasn't made of wood. There wasn't any light coming from it, and it didn't seem to be made of anything. But under the green and red elemental light, this thin disc had some specks of light on it. These specks of light weren't elemental light, but rather fluorescent. These specks of light were like starlight. These specks of light were moving in a mysterious way, and as the green and red elemental light came closer, the specks of light grew darker and darker. Clang! The executioner's elemental light was blocked by this strange disc, and the disc was spinning slightly, as if it wasn't damaged at all. What kind of soul armament is this? Xiao Hua was stunned. Xiao, Fairy Hongxia, who was standing next to Xiao Mao, hurriedly called out. This is the 5-elemental astrolabe that was used to set up the 5-elemental sword array in the sword catacomb. Oh, so that's what it is. Xiao Hua understood. He had heard from Li Zongbao that after the 5-elemental sword array was broken by Fairy Hongxia, the 5-elemental astrolabe flew away with Liao Quebec. But somehow, it ended up in Night Rain's hand. Humph, Xiao Hua laughed coldly. Night Rain, even if you have the 5-elemental astrolabe, do you think you can escape from me? While speaking, Xiao Hua clapped his hands and a dragon roar resounded. The seal of overturning the sea was summoned as well. The yellow coiling dragon was activated by Xiao Hua's mana and flew straight into the air. The seal in its mouth also enveloped Night Rain from afar. The powerful sealing force came from the seal of overturning the sea. This Night Rain stared dumbfoundedly at the heart sword in front of Xiao Mao. Then he looked at the sword gourd in the air, and finally at the seal of the overturning sea. He finally understood how terrifying Xiao Hua was. When had he ever seen a cultivator or swordsman who could control 3 magic treasures and swords at the same time? Hee, Xiao Hua laughed sinisterly. My wife, you go and help senior brother Li. I will chop off the head of this soul cultivator. Swordsman. Yes, Fairy Hongxia pursed her lips and smiled. She saw Xiao Hua toss out the dozens of sparkling fire talismans. She knew what Xiao Hua was going to do. Sure enough, when Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Mao flew towards Li Zongbao, dozens of huge fireballs exploded in the Night Rain. Not only did the 5 elements astrolabe shake violently, but even the dragon-shaped sword was also shaken to the point that it dissipated. Night Rain, who was inside the sword gourd, was pushed left and right by the shockwave, as if he could not control his body. Bastard, I'll take your life. The smoke dissipated, and Yi Yu rushed out of the air wave with a somewhat ashen face. His divine sense swept over, but he didn't see Xiao Hua's figure. Just as he felt that something was wrong, he heard Xiao Hua's sneer from above his head. It was precisely Xiao Hua who had used the Demon Realm's concealment technique to ambush him from behind. That huge wolf-tooth club carried a woo sound as it smashed towards Yi Yu's back. Go! Night Rain panicked and hurriedly urged the 5-elemental astrolabe to block Xiao Hua's wolf-tooth club. Unfortunately, he miscalculated. He did not see Xiao Hua's right hand holding the wolf-tooth club. That hand was already open with draw. The moment the wolf-tooth club touched the 5-elemental astrolabe, Xiao Hua used the heaven and earth sleeve technique. In an instant, he cut off the connection between Night Rain and the 5-elemental astrolabe. Then, before Night Rain could be surprised, the 5-elemental astrolabe mysteriously disappeared from the air. Kill! Xiao Hua's face showed a sinister smile. The yin-yang sword gourd in the air flashed slightly, and the soul-slaying vital light flew out again. Seeing that Night Rain had lost the 5-elemental astrolabe under Xiao Hua's sneak attack, and was about to fall under the soul-slaying vital light, an extremely hot and violent shockwave came from behind Xiao Hua and the others. Moreover, Xiao Mao exclaimed again. Chapter 2850. Xiao Hua had no time to kill Night Rain. He hurriedly looked back, and saw that Hitorigami was already less than 2 li away from them. Although it was only 2 li away, most of the ghost heads around Xiao Hua's group had disappeared. The green light was also destroyed by Hitorigami's heat wave. The hundreds of spirit soldiers and soul beasts that were chasing them did not dare to approach Hitorigami. As for Hou Yan, who wanted to kill Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia, his expression was extremely ugly. Although the ghost heads he controlled were still struggling in the heat wave, they seemed to be extremely afraid of Hitorigami. However, all of this was nothing. What puzzled Xiao Hua the most was that Hanba, who was originally chasing after him, was now looking at Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao seemed to be imprisoned by something. Although he was holding the shooting sun arrow in his hand, other than his earlier exclamation, he could not move at all. Even the dozen or so soul warriors that had been attacking Li Zongbao from all sides were now nothing more than blossoms of blood. Slowly, they fell to the ground. Clearly, this was done by Hitorigami, who was 2 li away. This is bad, Xiao Hua immediately understood. Hitorigami has taken a fancy to Xiao Mao. I'm afraid he's going to be used as a mistress. As he thought about it, Xiao Hua glared fiercely at Night Rain, who had used the opportunity while he was distracted to check on Xiao Mao, and who had managed to activate his sword light to escape into the distance. He pointed at the yin-yang sword gourd, and the spirit extermination primordial light from the sword gourd immediately flew out and surrounded Xiao Mao, trying to break free from the force that was imprisoning Xiao Mao, who knew that when the green and red sword flashed, Xiao Mao was still unable to move. It was as if there was no imprisonment at all. Ouch! At this moment, Fairy Hongxia screamed and could not help but hold her forehead. Seeing this, Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted, "Don't release your soul sense." Just as he finished speaking, a burning feeling was born. Xiao Hua looked at Hitorigami, who was flying very close to him, and helplessly put away the seal of turning the sea and yin-yang sword gourd, leaving only the soul-slaying dream and mountain splitter around him. What should I do? Xiao Hua took out the wishful staff, and was also unable to hit anything. Xiao Hua panicked. This Hitorigami's methods were really strange. He had no idea how to deal with it. Just as Xiao Hua was at his wit's end, Ho Yan, whose face was green and red, clenched his teeth. He looked at where Night Rain was fleeing in panic, and pointed his bone staff at the ghost head. The ghost head let out a howl, and quickly fled with Ho Yan. It didn't want to stay here any longer. Xiao Hua slightly squinted his eyes and saw that Ho Yan had also run away, but he was also unable to take care of him. At this moment, something strange happened again. Xiao Mao's figure suddenly charged towards Hitorigami. His flying speed was extremely fast. How can this be? Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. He immediately used the wind escape technique and chased after Xiao Mao. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and used the heaven and earth sleeve technique to take Xiao Mao into his space. But right at this time, Xiao Mao's figure suddenly vanished. Xiao Hua's universe and sleeve technique actually missed. This Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. He didn't know whether he had taken Xiao Mao into his space or not. At this time, that incomparable heat suddenly surged. Xiao Hua's heart swelled, as if his whole body was about to explode. However, this feeling disappeared in a flash. His entire surroundings immediately became cool and cool again. Looking into the distance, Hitorigami, who had been approaching earlier, had also disappeared. At this time, even if Xiao Hua didn't look at his space, how could he not know that Xiao Mao must have been taken away by Hitorigami? However, Xiao Hua still cautiously looked into his space. There was no sign of Xiao Mao's figure. Xiao Lang, junior brother Xiao Fairy Hongxia, and Li Zongbao's voices rang out at the same time. The two of them stared blankly at the scene that was abnormally lively just a moment ago. It was a matter of life and death. Now it was abnormally quiet. There was no sign of a fourth person. They didn't know what to say. There, Xiao Hua opened his left hand slightly and quickly looked. He pointed in a direction and said, "Quickly chase, let's go." Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia naturally didn't know that Xiao Hua's transcendence vision had seen a streak of bright red in the distance. They looked at each other and both of them activated their transcendence energy, and followed Xiao Hua in that direction. Xiao Hua kept his transcendence vision open, not daring to be distracted. He was afraid that he would accidentally lose track of Hitorigami. Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia knew that Xiao Hua didn't have a sense of direction. As they flew forward with Xiao Hua, they paid attention to the direction. However, Xiao Hua's lightning escape technique was so fast. How could Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia catch up to him? In just a moment, Xiao Hua's figure disappeared from their eyes. Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia had no choice but to release their divine senses. Luckily, as Hitorigami's figure disappeared, the burning heat also disappeared. The two of them could still see Xiao Hua through their divine senses. They saw that Xiao Hua wasn't chasing in a straight line. Instead, he was moving left and right as if he was playing hide and seek with someone. Luckily, Xiao Hua's lightning escape technique was really impressive. He could still change directions in such a hurry. However, it was obvious that even if Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia could catch up to Xiao Hua with their divine senses, with Xiao Hua's speed, he would sooner or later rush out of the range of their divine senses. Fairy Hongxia smiled bitterly and turned to look at Li Zongbao. Although Li Zongbao's expression was calm, his eyes were obviously red. Follow junior brother Xiao. Li Zongbao casually swung the immortal slaughtering whip in his hand. Now that Xiao Mao is in danger, junior brother Xiao can't not go and save him. With your phoenix token and my immortal slaughtering whip here, there shouldn't be any danger for now. Fairy Hongxia knew that Li Zongbao's words were reasonable. However, she was still worried. Not to mention that she had seen so many ghostly heads earlier, which had frightened her. Even Hitorigami's ability to burn divine senses and separate Xiao Mao made her worried for Xiao Hua. Indeed, not long after, Xiao Hua escaped from their divine senses, and they couldn't find any trace of him. Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia didn't dare to go in any other direction. They only chased in the direction where Xiao Hua disappeared. Xiao Hua naturally knew that Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia were in an awkward situation. However, he really couldn't have the best of both worlds. His divine senses were severely injured. Not only did he not dare to release them, but he also felt waves of discomfort coming from the Buddha's Saraira. He could only release his Buddhist senses. However, he couldn't find any trace of Hitorigami. At this moment, he could only use his Buddhist senses to search for traces of Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao. He could only use his Dharma eyes to track the faint bright red in the distance. Logically speaking, Xiao Hua's lightning evasion was already extremely fast. Previously, he should have been able to surpass Hitorigami by a lot. However, it was strange now. After chasing for a long time, he still couldn't get close to the bright red. It was as if Hitorigami didn't take Xiao Hua seriously at all. Moreover, the bright red in front of him was always vague and indistinct. It even hid from time to time. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be careless. How could he distinguish the direction? He only chased after the bright red light. After chasing for more than half a day, the surrounding scenery changed greatly. The original barren land gradually disappeared. Large patches of vegetation began to appear. Of course, these vegetation were also extremely withered and yellow. They were all on the verge of death. The mountain peaks became steeper. Between the mountains, there were more obvious ravines. The deep pits must be the pools and streams from before. Similarly, there were many millet stalks lying on the ground. Some were more than a foot tall, while others were only an inch long. These millet stalks didn't have any ears. They were no different from the withered and yellow vegetation nearby. If it was any other day, Xiao Hua might have scattered the millet stalks. However, his body was like a bolt of lightning as he whizzed past. He didn't have any intention to investigate. Even so, after Xiao Hua's body streaked across a ravine, he suddenly stopped. The lightning around him didn't stop. In fact, it suddenly expanded. He flew forward for more than 1,000 feet and arrived at another ravine. Immediately after, Xiao Hua's entire body was like a headless fly as he flew extremely quickly within a radius of 100 zhang. There were even a few times when Xiao Hua's body escaped into the ravine. However, after tossing and turning like this for the time it took to finish a meal, Xiao Hua finally stopped in midair. His eyes quickly spun around, as if he wanted to find something in this place. That's right, just a moment ago, an indistinct bright red flew to this place and suddenly disappeared. It disappeared without any warning. Xiao Hua had already searched this place for a long time. Within his Dharma eyes and Buddhist perception, there were no traces of it. There were no burning marks. It was as if Hamba had never come to this place. At this point, how could Xiao Hua not know that he had lost Hamba? Hamba had calmly escaped in front of his eyes. In fact, Xiao Hua had a faint feeling that the so-called bright red might be Hamba's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. But now what could Xiao Hua say? He had been flying for a long time. Not only did he not catch up to Xiao Mao, Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao who were behind him had also disappeared. Xiaohua looked up to the sky and shouted. He was really vexed. However, that voice reverberated in the distance. There were many echoes. Every echo seemed to be the mountains mocking Xiaohua. Right, how could this young master forget? Suddenly, Xiaohua thought of the fire ape in his spirit storage bag. Without hesitation, Xiaohua patted his hand and took out the fire ape from his spirit storage bag. At this moment, the fire ape was wearing a Taoist crown on its head. It looked left and right in astonishment. Its expression was even more like a monkey wearing a crown. When the fire ape saw Xiaohua, its eyes were completely red. Its face revealed its extreme viciousness. Flames appeared on its hands without hesitation and attacked Xiaohua. Humph, Xiaohua sneered. He pointed his finger and chanted an incantation. Roar, roar, roar. The sun and moon corona above the fire ape's head shone brightly and gradually tightened. An incomparable pain emerged from the fire ape's forehead. That pain was bone-piercing and heart-piercing. It directly pierced into the fire ape's soul. The fire ape screamed miserably and rolled on the ground, smashing rocks and other objects into pieces. Chapter 2851. Looking at the fire ape's painful appearance, the anger in Xiaohua's heart lessened. He stopped and roared. Where is the drought demon? Quickly bring me to find it. Xiaohua called out 3 times in a row, but the fire ape was still moaning on the ground. It didn't answer and didn't fly up. There was still an obvious untamed look in its eyes. Since you don't want to speak, then you can wait for death. Xiaohua sneered and chanted the incantation again. Roar, the fire ape roared again. Its voice was already clearly hoarse. Even its rolling on the ground slowed down. You still won't speak? Xiaohua stopped the incantation and said indifferently. Gigi, the fire ape rolled its eyes. It seemed to have compromised. It carefully climbed up from the ground, arched its claws and pointed in a direction in front. Oh, where is it? Just as Xiaohua was about to raise his head, a sharp wind suddenly came from his lower body. A black shadow smashed towards Xiaohua's lower body faster than a stick. Damn it, Xiaohua was angry. He leaned his body slightly and dodged the black shadow with extreme agility. Moreover, he stretched out his hand and easily caught the black shadow. This black shadow was furry and somewhat prickly. It was the fire ape's tail. Xiaohua pulled his hand, and the fire ape's several zhang tall body immediately fell down. Xiaohua's other hand slightly clenched and smashed towards the fire ape's lower back with all his strength. Boom! A loud sound was heard. A series of sounds came from the fire ape's body. Roar! It was even louder than the previous scream. The fire ape couldn't help but cry out. Boom, boom, boom. Xiaohua wasn't stingy. He raised his leg and stepped on the fire ape's thigh. His right hand continuously struck towards the fire ape's waist. Sparks flew out from the fire ape's fur. Moreover, the place where Xiaohua hit was twitching. It was obvious that the fire ape was in extreme pain. However, Xiaohua was firmly stepping on it. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't move. Roar! Another loud cry. A stream of crimson red blood flowed down from the fire ape's body. Evil creature. Why aren't you leading the way? Seeing this, Xiaohua withdrew his fist and flew into the air as he cursed. Gg, the fire ape mumbled a few times. How could Xiaohua be impatient? He started chanting again. Awoo, the fire ape could not help but hold its head and wail again. However, this time it was quick-witted again. It hurriedly flew up, stepped on flames and flew away. Humph, Xiaohua coldly snorted. His mouth didn't stop as he chased after the fire ape. However, after flying for about 100 miles and arriving at a few mountain peaks, the fire ape stopped moving forward. It hung its arms pitifully and looked helpless. I still have to die. Xiaohua sneered and chanted another incantation, causing the fire ape to roll around in the valley for the time it took to drink a cup of tea. The fire ape was about to roll its eyes, but it still didn't fly up. Obviously, the fire ape also couldn't find the whereabouts of Hamba. Xiaohua was speechless. He fiercely kicked the fire ape and kept it into his spirit storage pouch. Then he looked around. Under the fire ape's lead, he had already flown far away. He released his Buddhist perception and roughly looked around. Within 200 miles, There was no sign of Fairy Hongxia or Li Zongbao. Damn it, what is this? Xiaohua was angry. He raised his head and roared. Following Xiaohua's roar, countless heavenly lightning fell from the sky from his hands. Rumble. It was like rain falling down. Kacha. Tens of hundreds of thumb-sized heavenly lightning struck the mountain peaks around Xiaohua. Countless mountain rocks were smashed and rolled down the mountain. Countless dust flew up and covered the entire mountain peak. Even the countless withered trees and vegetation were ignited and turned into powder. They were blown up into the sky along with the dust. Xiaohua turned to look at the mess that he had created. Xiaohua slightly vented the anger in his heart. Biting his dry lips, Xiaohua turned around and was about to fly back to find Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia. At this moment, several beast cries sounded. A few ripples similar to divine perception swept over. Then a clear voice sounded. Where did this Dao sect cultivator come from? How dare you behave so atrociously in my Ming Mountains? Are you tired of living? Spirit warrior? Soul perception? Hearing this voice, Xiaohua turned his head to look. Between the two mountains, a white-winged spirit beast similar to the one Hou Yan was riding was flying over. On top of it was a woman wearing strange clothes. She was waving a bone staff in her hand and looking at Xiaohua coldly. This woman had dark skin and was very skinny. Although her eyes were big, her sharp mouth and monkey cheeks made Xiaohua feel uncomfortable. Of course it's me. When Xiaohua saw the spirit warrior, an inexplicable anger rose in his heart. He was too lazy to use his divine perception. With a wave of his hand, tens of heavenly lightning bolts appeared in the sky. With a rumbling sound, they came crashing down on the female spirit warrior. You dare! Seeing so many heavenly lightning bolts, the woman's face changed greatly. She hurriedly waved the bone staff in her hand. A black gas was emitted from the bone staff. Tens of fist-sized ghost heads rushed out and lined up above the woman's head. Clearly, they were trying to block the heavenly lightning bolts that were similar to Xiaohua's anger. Third sister at this time, tens of similar spirit beasts appeared behind the woman. On top of these spirit beasts were tens of spirit warriors. When these spirit warriors saw the heavenly lightning above the woman's head, they all turned pale with fright. Without the slightest hesitation, they waved the bone staff in their hands. Hundreds of ghost heads appeared near the female spirit warrior and rushed up into the air. Rumble, 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 lightning flashed. In the instant that the 100 ghost heads appeared, they came crashing down. Under the tens of heavenly lightning bolts, the ghost heads didn't even have the slightest chance to struggle. In an instant, they disintegrated. However, the black smoke that came out of the ghost heads and the green light that came out of them were barely able to block the heavenly lightning. Hee, enemies really do meet on a narrow road. Xiaohua sneered. Just now, a spirit warrior that fought me to the death left, and now you've sent over 10 more. This young master will send you all on your way. Thinking of this, Xiaohua didn't say anything else. He slapped his hand and the yin-yang sword gourd flew out. With a point of his finger, the green and red executioner's primordial light soared into the sky. It was aimed at the neck of the female spirit warrior, who had already lost her soul. The executioner's primordial light was extremely fast and sharp. The faint black smoke and the thin green light couldn't block it at all. Although the female spirit warrior was extremely ugly, her slender neck had a string of small white bones. It was dark and somewhat alluring. But this allure was powerless under the executioner's primordial light. It could only show the deathly whiteness of her life. Xiaohua, have mercy. Seeing that the female spirit warrior's head was about to roll down under the executioner's primordial light, an anxious and pleasantly surprised voice came from afar. Xiaohua was stunned. He hurriedly pointed his finger. With a SI sound, the two executioners' primordial light stopped. It had just touched the female spirit warrior's skin. Traces of blood flowed down the female spirit warrior's pitch-black neck and dyed her pure white bones red. The female spirit warrior was already stunned. She didn't dare to move in the slightest. You are. Xiaohua raised his eyes to look. Behind the female spirit warrior, a similarly dressed woman flew out on a soul beast. But this woman's skin was white and her face was also pretty. Moreover, in Xiaohua's eyes, this face gave birth to a familiar feeling in his heart. But Xiaohua blinked his eyes. He couldn't think of where he had seen this woman before. "I am." A trace of joy flew out from the woman's face. But this joy disappeared in a flash. She said with a smile, "You'll have to guess who I am." "But I know that you are Xiaohua. Your name. I already knew it." This Xiaohua was really at a loss. "But shouldn't you first release this concubine servant girl?" the woman said with a smile, although her mouth was a bit rude, but it wasn't to the point where fellow Taoist Xiao would take her life as soon as you saw her, right? Fellow Taoist Xiao? Xiaohua was even more stunned. What kind of spirit warrior would call a cultivator fellow Taoist? Looking at this woman's increasingly familiar face, Xiaohua couldn't think of where he had seen her before. Seeing the disappointment on this woman's face, Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization. He hurriedly said, "Io? You're Zai? You. How are you a woman?" You can still remember?" The woman laughed. But then she shook her head slightly. "Unfortunately, this concubine's name is Ziming, not Zai. Zai is only this concubine's twin brother." "Ha ha ha, so that's how it is." Xiaohua suddenly realized. He clapped his hands and said, "I knew it. If it really was Zai, there's no way I wouldn't recognize him." While speaking, Xiaohua pointed a finger. The death beam flew back into the yin-yang sword gourd. When the death beam left the woman's neck, she instantly collapsed on the soul beast. Her bones were soft and her muscles were numb. It was difficult for her to get up. In this world, not everyone could face life and death calmly. "Xiaohong, why aren't you thinking? Young Master Xiao?" Ziming scolded the woman. The woman struggled to get up, but she couldn't. She could only whisper, "This servant thanks." Don't. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and bowed. "This has nothing to do with you. It's all this Xiao's fault. I'm the one who should apologize." "Good," Ziming clapped his hands and said, "Young Master Xiao, no wonder Zai has been praising you since he came back from Sky Patrol City. It turns out that you're really as magnanimous and pure as he said." This kind of apology is easy to say, but it's extremely difficult to do. "Sai, don't mention it." Xiaohua smiled bitterly and waved his hand. "It's clearly this Xiao's fault. How can it be this lady's fault? How can this kind of thing affect one's character?" Then, Xiaohua looked at Ziming and hesitated for a moment before saying, "This Xiao always thought that Zai was a disciple of an aristocratic family in the Three Kingdoms of Cultivation. I really didn't expect him to be a citizen of Meng Mountain. How is he now?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.